Once again, good morning. We're going to now convene our normal council study session. Again, Mayor Freeman is out of town. Council Member Heredia is the voice from the ceiling, is attending by Zoom. So let's go ahead and start the agenda. Item 2A is a presentation and discussion draft of the downtown Mesa micromobility and parking plan. Did I miss something?
City Council.
Oh, we got to review the agenda first. Sit down. Thank you. I have my training wheels on. This is really working out for me. So, items on the agenda. Oh, come on now. So I had asked for a brief presentation on, I think it's 5E. Nope, that's not it. D? Yeah, thank you. Might have moved. So modifying fees and charges for the Parks, Recreation, Community Facilities District. Just a brief presentation on what these charges are and who they most impact.
Good morning, Council. Andrea Moore, Director for Parks, Recreation, and Community Facilities. I put a brief presentation on your agenda. There it is. So this is our regular process. We are on a different cycle than the city's other fees and charges review because we implement our charges as of April 1st in advance of our summer registration for our camp programs and aquatics. So we have gone through a process with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board that started last fall. We reviewed other communities' charges, compared them to ours, went through our entire fee structure with a subcommittee of the Parks Board, and then reviewed the changes that we're recommending to you with them, and they were in concurrence to recommend approval to you. So we take a look at, as I said, the neighboring communities' fees, our cost of providing services, and market conditions when we are establishing these. Our fees, similar to a couple other departments in the city, are ranges to accommodate for different seasons, different lengths of programs that happen throughout the year. And so the changes that we present to you are changes in the ranges or verbiage changes in our fee structure. So with that, there are only a couple that have a fiscal impact, and I've outlined those on the first couple of slides here, mainly having to do with field supervision fees as our staff costs continue to increase. We have those on Hohokam Stadium and also on the rest of our sports complexes. So Hohokam sits within our commercial facilities schedule. It's called out separately. On the Convention Center, Amphitheater, and Post, we are putting a new fee in place for the Neon Garden, anticipating that opening here soon, and expanding the amphitheater fee range to accommodate any non-ticketed events where the amphitheater is rented. Then on the recreation side, the fiscal impacts on those changes, the biggest one on the entire schedule are the aquatics fees for what's estimated to be about $50,000. So that's a fee that's assessed for using pool heat, $1.50 per lane per hour, and only during seasons when we have to turn the pool heat on. The groups that rent the pools, this is not a new fee to them. They were paying it previously to Mesa Public Schools. And when the city took on the utility accounts for all the pools, with our implementation of our new intergovernmental agreement last year, we are switching the assessment of that fee over to the city from Mesa Public Schools. It's a new fee to us, but not to the groups. Then on special events, we put some fee structure in place and changed the ranges for assisting with event setup and breakdown, and for city-produced ticketed events, which right now is the ice rink. Then on recreation centers, just an increase in some of our room rental rates based on market conditions to help with cost recovery. The other changes are changes that do not have fiscal impacts, just updating definitions, verbiage, eliminating some of our fees as we try to, for example, we had a birthday party package in there. We still rent rooms at our recreation centers for birthday parties, but people prefer to bring their own cake and supplies, and so it's not a birthday package anymore, it's just a room rental. So it's making some of those clarifications in our fee structure.
You used to bake the cakes?
No. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer, but those are a brief overview of the changes.
Any questions? Yep. Mr. Adams?
Thank you. Good morning. You mentioned just a few minutes ago that with respect to heating the pools, it's not going to be, I think you said, a new fee to the end user.
Correct.
So they're used to paying it, but is it going up or is it staying even in amount?
Vice Mayor Summers, Councilmember Adams, it's the same fee. Mesa Public Schools used to charge it by participant by season.
Okay.
I believe it was $25 per person during the cooler months. We're doing it as a lane charge, but we believe it'll be at the same fee rate overall because it's $1.50 per lane per hour.
So youth groups and others that use that facility probably won't feel any fiscal impact.
We do not expect them
Okay.
to see a change.
Okay. The other question I had was, you mentioned the post and other facilities. How do we look to see that we're, I'll say, competitive with other similar facilities in other cities or hotel meeting facilities and things like this? Do we look at that? Do we want to be competitive? Maybe not too high, not too low?
Councilmember Adams, we do take a look at other similarly sized facilities. So the Post is a little different. The Convention Center does have a goal of recovering its costs based on its fees. The Post, because it's used for so many city meetings, it has different goals. But in establishing those fees, we are looking at what other communities charge and other private rooms that are similarly sized.
So we have an equally footed opportunity to attract meetings and other groups that may wish to use these facilities. No one's going to say, well, Mesa's twice as expensive or anything like that. That's what I'm hearing. We're competitive.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Excellent. How would you describe this as far as what's the impact on the everyday family? So if I wanted to rent a Ramada, maybe, use the fishing ponds, the everyday kind of use of these public facilities, is there much of an impact on everyday or even going swimming? I know there's a fee for that, but is there much of an impact on folks that use these facilities just for recreation over the summer?
Vice Mayor, there's not.
Okay.
I'd say the field preparation fees are the things that would, because we are increasing those based on our staffing costs going up. That has a direct impact to the groups that are renting the fields. But for a Ramada rental, for an open space permit, those types of things, there isn't much of a change.
Okay, so every day, not so much, but if you participate in, maybe your kids participate in a baseball, or if you're bringing them to the ice rink, there might be a pass-along cost?
Correct. Vice Mayor, we keep an eye on what our staffing costs and production costs are and try to keep that cost recovery level even. So there are small incremental changes that come in throughout each year based on those reviews.
Right, and we're trying, obviously, like you said, we're trying to recover our costs for these. Any other questions on this item? Council?
I have one question about this. So you mentioned labor costs have gone up for staffing of the ball fields. Are the ball fields the only, well, I guess I don't know how to, every ball field has to be staffed when it's rented out?
Vice Mayor, council member, go forth. Excuse me. Yes, we have site supervisors on site whenever we're opening a sports complex.
Is it one per field, or you're talking about?
Generally, it is one per field.
And does that apply to the soccer fields as well, the
It does.
multi-use field?
It does.
And it's one per field?
One per complex, sorry.
Okay,
No, yeah.
for the soccer side, for the multi-use? Or
Right.
okay. But for the ball fields, it's one per field?
No, it's
No,
one per
It
complex.
is one per, the whole thing. Okay. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Duff.
Hi, Andrea. I have a question about the Post. I know in its first year, we gave favorable rates because we wanted people to come and really experience and know it's there, and it's been very successful. Almost every day, it seems like there's an event that I've attended so many, and it's been a gem for our community. Going into our second year, are we making adjustments? Because I know we did favorable rates in order to get it going.
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Duff, we are. So the changes in the schedule put the discounted rate for city-related events in place as the standard rate. So those are still greatly reduced, just covering out-of-pocket costs. The other discounts that were in place, the rate structure has always been there, but we did a discount for the first year, and those discounts are now removed. So they are going up to full price for private rentals.
Do you have any idea what kind of adjustment is that? I don't have an idea what the difference is between a city rate and the going rate on our facilities.
Just a second here. So we are now at that main room, both sides, because it divides into two. But if you were renting the main room during regular business hours, we're at $250 per hour. If you're going into the evening or into weekends, it goes $350, $450 based on overtime costs related to that, versus the fee for internal events is $25 an hour for that same space.
Okay, so as far as our community, they've been able to use it $25 an hour, which that's pretty cheap. That's very cheap. To 250 and then up according to the time.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we'll see how, it's finding that balance where it's highly utilized, because having people using it benefits more than just the event, but bringing people into downtown and surrounding businesses and such. So finding that balance, and I know we feel the same way about the convention center. This is just more in the middle of downtown. So we'll measure that and see, where this sweet spot is to make sure it's activated and used as much as possible and still be, $25 an hour. I appreciate that everybody had that experience their first year, but it's not realistic to be able to cover costs for sure.
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Duff, just if you think of the types of events, if it's a family party, a wedding, a family reunion, birthday party, those types of things, it'd be at those higher rates. If it's a community-based event that the city's involved in, so that's downtown Mesa Association, that's trade associations that come in, any event that the city's sponsoring directly, those types of activations are still at the discounted rate.
Are nonprofits at the city rate, or are they at the going rate?
Councilmember Duff, it would depend on if the city's involved with it, so the
Okay.
type of event. But if you're looking at something completely external to anything the city's involved in, it would be the higher rate.
Okay, I foresee a lot of requests to get the city involved. My next wedding.
And we
huh?
do see that already.
I'm just kidding. Okay, and then if there's no more questions on this item, I had another parks question, but it's a separate item.
Well, I was just can I just ask a follow-up to yours? Who makes a determination of whether the city gets involved or not?
It's,
Or they become sponsored?
Councilmember Goforth, it's based on who's approaching us to request us to book it in there. So if the city's involved, we're hearing that from other city departments, that we want to book that room for this purpose.
So they have to have an existing relationship
Yeah, I don't
with
think
the
it's
city?
that kind of a nuance where they just go try to
Yeah.
hook themselves up with a department. I mean, the department is usually part of it. I mean, you saw the photos of the graduation of those who've made it through self-sufficiency. So, that's not just the city, that's that larger organization. So, but the truth be known is when we built this and we opened it up, we built it and recognizing this was going to be an event space that we've lacked significantly for city departments and city groups to have a venue, because otherwise the only other option was really the convention center, and there we're having to struggle with, having to pay that market rate at a very high level. And it was hard to get around that, and we were also having to have Andrea make exceptions for her rates on that for city departments. This venue has been really nice for departments and community groups that we are associated with. It's like an existing relationship now. To have these kind of events. And as you all know, you've been there several times, it gets well utilized, and I think it provides a community benefit, right? Where we're able to host these kind of events in downtown as opposed to having to go outside the downtown area or try to compete with the space at the convention center. And I would say for some of these venues, this venue kind of fits well for the size that we're looking for, that would be for the department. So I'm not too concerned that this is getting abused by community groups of ours. The cities already have some kind of relationship with the group, and we're probably being asked to find the location for this activity, and that's why they're coming to the Post.
So we're not actively marketing it, and if a private group does run it, it's kind of icing on the cake?
It's online, it's being marketed, but it's the first year, it was getting used so much, and I even told the staff, stop marketing weddings, because, we needed all the other time for other city events. So we're kind of learning how it gets best used, but best used right now is community and city civic events. That seems to be the most popular opportunity. We've had the police department has had their use of force study presentation there. We've used it for a variety of different community presentations. Departments will use it for lunches that they're hosting. So it gets used, I think, I don't know what the percentage is, Andrea, but by city use, I would say majority. Is that fair, or 50%?
It definitely is majority. It's way more than 50%.
Okay.
I believe this year we've had 35 events.
Yeah. So
and of those, I'd say 80% of them are city
yeah.
functions.
Most of this building gets used mostly by the city.
By the city. Will you remind me where the funding source to renovate came from?
It came from both cash from the general fund as well as it was identified as a project. And I forget what year.
It was in multiple park bonds.
Park bonds, but I can't remember what year.
It was in 12 and 18.
12 and 18. So it's, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you. Just a couple brief items. So in the private sector, when you're looking for meeting space, there are a couple of little surprises that come along with the stated rate known as plus tax, and then usually a 20% service fee that sort of skews the real cost. Do we do plus on these facilities, or is it just it's this much an hour and that's it?
Councilmember Adams, we do have charges for room setups, for booking fees. Yes, it's plus.
Okay.
Well, but
all
it's
right.
also, we don't have like a destination resort fee. We don't have
Sure.
those kind of things. We're just paying, again, we're not doing it, but the attempt is on most of our facilities to get to cost recovery. This is not a cost recovery because it provides a venue. Really, we think of it as just in some ways an extension of a city facility that the city departments can use, because otherwise they're going to have to go out and make a payment for some other venue. And this is the convenience of having it downtown and the size, I think, has been ideal for us to have.
The Post includes the room set. That's not the case at the convention center. So
Okay.
the convention center follows the typical market
Yeah.
charges.
Okay.
So it's the room, it's the equipment that needs to be brought in, it's the food and beverage, it's the AV, all of those are the plus, the service fees that get added. But the Post includes the room set.
Okay, I'm not being critical of it, I'm just more asking, do we do it or do we not? It's, when you get into the meeting business, you come to expect it. So most people coming to us from the private sector who want a meeting space. But I would echo Councilmember Duff's comments about the Post. I think it's a great venue. I think we should continue to look at it from a standpoint of it's a magnet to bring people downtown. So and I'm sure you will. I'm sure we'll keep a close eye on it to see, what usage is and who's using it and whether any fee increases have taken us in the wrong direction. So not concerns, just comments, and understand we're competitive in the marketplace is what we are. Thanks.
Yes, Councilmember Duff.
These little questions end up being big ones, but I would encourage to lean away from marketing for the wedding, for weddings.
Councilmember Duff, we don't do that.
Okay, all right,
That's how
because
we
we have
started. We
other wedding
squashed
venues.
that.
And I think the true wonderful thing about this is how, there's so many needs within the community to have a space for their meetings or events. Having it as a community event in a community space, I think is where the big value is, whereas weddings and such, we have other options. We don't have really any options in downtown for community events. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Jim, did you have anything? Oh, you're just making face. I thought you had something. I'll just close. I appreciate the presentation on this. My objective with asking for this short presentation was I want to be fiscally responsible and make sure that we're recovering costs where we should be recovering costs, for example, where we are in competition with the market. But I also feel that our parks and pools and all those things that our voters support, families should have access to them. It should be accessible to everyone as best we can, while understanding there are financial realities that we have to deal with. So I appreciate all the work you've put into this to make sure that those facilities will remain open and accessible. Before you leave, I believe if there's no other question on this, Councilmember Duff, would you like to ask on 4H?
Yeah, on 4H, since you're here, and I'm, as you know, we've shared some emails. I'm interested in doing some upgrades, some replacements, some additions to Beverly Park, since we're looking at a couple of housing projects, which will bring a lot more children into that park, and it's one that, I guess the history, it wasn't a city park, and it was created with some other funds, so I don't think has really been on our radar as far as investment. I know we have the fun and fitness events to activate the park, and I appreciate that. So just to understand this contract is for our parks and playgrounds across the city to replace, or is it targeted for buying new equipment, or how does this contract work?
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Duff, this is our contract for replacement parts. So at $1.5 million, that's not enough to construct a park. This is a slide fails like at Beverly to be able to purchase that replacement slide, a replacement panel, clamp that breaks, those sorts of repairs.
Our existing equipment to replace things as they wear or break or whatever.
Correct.
So we can use this contract for those, a few items that we identified there, the slide, the
Yes.
climbing wall, a few things like
Correct.
that. But it wouldn't be any funding to do a basketball hoop or anything like that,
It wouldn't be.
because it's not existing.
Right, it's not a construction contract, it's just for components.
Okay,
So if
got
we're
it.
replacing a basketball hoop, we would buy it through this contract. If we're constructing a new court, there are other contracts, usually through the job order contracting, that we pursue to do that type of work.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other
Can I just
questions?
follow up with
Yes,
it? So what are we changing here? The agency that we're going through, or organization that we're going through for the contracts? Is that what the difference is?
Councilmember Goforth, this is the cooperative contract through Mojave. And I believe it's because they have a new contract in place.
It's
So
just
they-
providing you a contract to purchase those items off of
Correct.
the
And was
operator.
it with Mojave before? I guess that's my
Oh.
question.
I believe it was, but I'm not 100%. I'm
Okay.
going to see if it says
That
it
is-
in the
yes.
council report.
We don't know. We can get back to you on that.
Okay,
But
I'm
it's
just wondering if
provide-
this is a change, because
Well,
it
it's
said
usually, it means
offers
that we're
additional
just, we
details.
need a contract to continue to purchase
Okay.
equipment. So
Okay.
I'm assuming an existing contract has expired, or this one just provides better pricing. And so we would need the council authorization to begin procuring these replacement items off of this new contract.
And these are probably all the same businesses, Dave Bang, Arizona Recreation Design, that
It
we've
looks a lot
used in
alike.
the past.
Yeah.
Councilmember Goforth,
Not
it is.
changing.
And we
Okay.
have had prior contracts with them to be able to do this. Whether it was a Mojave cooperative contract, that I don't know off the top of my
Okay,
head.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this item?
No, but since you're here.
One more question?
Can I move on to 5C? On the general
So,
obligation bonds?
Mayor and council, we actually have a presentation. I was just kind of.
Oh, okay, okay.
So we have a presentation. Mark has a presentation for 5B and 5C, if you'd like to hear that.
That's great, thank you.
Okay. 'Cause I don't know if Andrea wants to talk about bond issuances and vanilla
Well, is
bonds.
there any other questions on this?
No, I had the question on, is listed on the list was a historic post office, and I didn't, but I can ask, what that was. But anyway, I can get that from the bond presentation?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, no other questions, and we'll have a brief presentation on 5B and 5C. Am I correct? 5B, yep, general obligation bonds and utilities. So for everybody watching, 5B is general obligation bonds, and 5C will be utility system revenue obligations.
You know when you bookmark and then they change the agenda?
Yeah, that's what-
It shifts the item number.
I like having drafts, though.
All right, well, good morning, Vice Mayor and Council. I'm Mark Hute, the City Treasurer, here to present the 2025 financing plan. And in addition to the city staff here today, we also have the city's bond counsel, Zach Sakis from Greenberg Traurig. So he will be here to help answer any legal questions that you may have. Okay, so I'll start off with some background information on the financing plan and process before getting into what's being proposed for today. So the financing plan is the city's plan to finance major capital projects. And we look to finance because it gives us another funding option to pay for those projects that help strengthen the community, such as libraries, parks, streets, and utility infrastructure. It also allows us to continue supporting public safety at a high level for a safer community, and it helps us secure water resources for the future. Also, with financing, there is an aspect of fairness involved because the payments are being made while the capital assets are benefiting the residents. Okay, so here's a brief overview of the financing process. So it really begins while creating the capital improvement program, where the city evaluates the needs of the residents, determines the projects, and then identifies how they're going to pay for those projects. And the funding source for those projects, they may be funded through existing cash or financing, or a combination of the two. If we do plan to finance, though, then we will seek voter authorization and approval to issue the general obligation bonds. Then we will look to access the financial markets to obtain those resources, and that's where we are today, is looking for that, the authorization to access the financial markets. Okay, so next is the financing evaluation. So the city's finance team includes financial services, OMB, our financial advisor, and our bond counsel. But it's important to point out that it is a citywide effort that involves the city manager, the city attorney, engineering, and the departments that plan on using those resources. But as an example, the city departments and engineering help us with identifying upcoming and ongoing projects. And the city departments also help us by forecasting those project outflows. It is with that information, we will determine how much we're going to issue and the timing of those issuances. Okay, so next is managing long-term obligations. So one of our main goals when we're managing these obligations is to have stable financing payments each year to avoid large fluctuations that may negatively impact the residents. So we want small incremental changes, not drastic changes that may impact the residents. And I'll show a few examples of these stable payments when we get to the current proposals. One thing to note is that our new issuances have a max maturity of 25 years. So with that being said, one of our goals is to have at least 25% of principal repaid in the first 10 years for those shorter life assets that are funded through the issuances. And then lastly, on this slide, another consideration is that these new issuances are non-callable for a 10-year period. What that means is for 10 years, we will not be able to refinance them or refund them.
Pay them off, you mean? If you could, we refinance.
But it could be paid off or just restructuring the payments.
Okay, so if we had the cash at some point, we could decide to pay these off within that 10 years? Is that correct?
You'd have to, that'd be a different fees.
Okay.
The non-callable just allows us to go into the market. It typically it gives some more certainty to the investors so that they're willing to it's more competitive rate. That's typically why we have it in there.
So lower interest costs.
Very good. Yeah, question?
I want to make sure I, excuse me, understand this. So non-callable means we cannot pay it off in the first 10 years, is that correct? Without penalty, or we just can't? I understand, if that's the case, I understand the issuer, those investing, if you will.
It mostly focuses on refinancing the outstanding debt.
Okay. So
I think the possibility of us paying off debt in 10 years is not something we really consider because it's just not a plausible scenario, really. It's not like paying off your mortgage. It's paying off hundreds of millions of dollars. So what it is it's a strategy, a financial strategy, as we go into the market to try to maximize or minimize the interest rates that we will be seeking in a competitive nature, right? So this is trying to position the sale of the bonds to get the most competitive rates. And this is one condition which helps bring certainty to the investor that allows us to lower it down. Now, we have lots of other outstanding debt that's coming up inside the 10 years. I don't know what the amount is, Mark, that we could go, it's beyond the 10 years that we could consider. But again, the market conditions are prevailing and don't suggest that that's a viable thing to do today, right?
That is
fair?
correct.
I mean, it's
That
not
is
like
correct.
just saying that we're going to limit it for 10 years for these bonds handcuffs the cities. We have years of outstanding debt that are beyond that 10 years, that if the market conditions were more favorable in interest rates, we would be considering those refinances. Is that fair?
And to Mr. Brady's point, we do evaluate it throughout the year. So we look for those opportunities to refinance those older issuances. But with the interest rates as high as they are, there's really no opportunities for them at this time.
Agreeing to the condition under the current interest rate environment is not a big ask.
Yeah.
So in other words, it provides some level of certainty to both the city and the investor. We know where we're going to be for 10 years.
Sure.
Got it, okay. I'm used to a banking environment, not a municipal environment, so I just want to, not being critical, just want to make sure I understand the terminology and what we're agreeing to and what we're obligated to.
And Vice Mayor and Council Member Adams, it definitely provides certainty to the investor, right? Because then they won't have the reinvestment risk.
Got it, and they're more likely to offer a more favorable rate then?
That is correct, because
Gotcha.
if they give us that optionality, then they're going to also demand a higher interest cost from us.
Sort of like a 5-year CD. Yeah, got Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, Vice Mayor and Council, and Zach Sakis, who's in the, here, also can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe also we have to do 10-year non-callable because I believe the regs changed, and to be tax exempt, do we have to do non-callable now for 10 years, or? Maybe I'm wrong.
Sakis.
Nobody wants to sit in the chairs. I don't know why.
Nobody wants to hear from bond counsel this early in the morning. Mayor Council Zach Sakis with Greenberg Traurig, been able to serve the city the past 10 years. I've been doing this about 20 years. So what changed, good memory, what changed in about 2017 was the refinancing rules. Industry standard, industry expectations to Councilmember Adams' earlier statement and Mark's statement. The 10-year call provision, non-callable provision is sort of industry standard. So again, city security and assurance of making investors have competitive rates. And then if we ask for an earlier call option, it's a higher interest cost to the city. So, lack of reinvestment risk to the investor, and then the city is able to project its principal and interest requirements over time. I was going to remind to the earlier question regarding potential prepayment of the bonds. You may remember a few years ago, we did the big check for the baseball. So you can defease bonds, you can prepay them even if the bonds are not callable. So it is an option that the city has done in the past. But
You're
it's
still making the payments.
But you're still making the payments. You just pre-fund a payment stream.
You put it in an
to pay
account
principal and
and
interest
hold
over
it.
time.
Okay, so it's paying it off, but it's making the payments pay.
It's like you put you set it in an escrow and it just draws down over a period of time.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Are you going to talk about the going rate? Are you, right now?
We'll come back to you on the sale.
Okay.
So this is
Okay.
setting us up for the opportunity. Council is authorizing us to go to the market,
Okay.
right? And then we come back to you, what's
April,
the timing? April?
week of April,
Come back in
21st.
April with the results of those rates that we get.
And the market changes.
What? Not in this environment?
Councilmember Duff, do you have something?
So even if I were to give a rate, it's going to be
Good
wrong.
idea, Mark.
If we're going to make a bad analogy, if it's, you mentioned mortgages, I think, or somebody mentioned mortgages, nobody's refinancing their mortgage right now. I mean, I think about what the rates were back in 2010 through 2012, we still have some of that outstanding debt, but the interest rates are phenomenal for us compared to what we would go on the market today, I'm sure. So we wouldn't really want to pay those off because we're getting such a good rate deal on that. But we might want to look at the higher interest rates again if we find the money. That's the question. Councilmember Duff, did you have something?
I don't know exactly how we, decide. I know it's on the projects ready to go and that, we'll sell the bonds in order to finance them. But the anticipation of losing a tax exempt status, would we want to sell more bonds, be more aggressive in what we do now? But I don't know enough about this whole process.
Yeah, we're
to
restricted
know.
on, Zach, remind me, it's like we can issue only so much and we have to spend it down within a period of time, correct?
Okay.
So it's, we try to time it. Matter of fact, I forget the amount is, Mark, we're actually reimbursing ourselves for construction costs that we've already incurred, but we need to get reimbursed ourselves with the bonds for that. But I don't know what the other direction looks like.
So
Zach.
with Vice Mayor, Councilmember Duff, great question, potentially changing regulatory environment, but undetermined at this time and somewhat speculative. Under the existing federal tax law and related regulations, the city, in its issuance of municipal bonds, is unable to overburden the tax exempt market. So you can't over-issue in anticipation of projects. So the projects need to be ready to go. The city needs to be ready to spend the proceeds, as Manager Brady mentioned. A portion of these will be reimbursing prior city expenditures, so we know that those projects are already completed or ready for expenditures. But we're restricted in kind of issuing extra tax exempt bonds under existing federal tax law and related regulations.
I know we try to sell bonds kind of in even flow so that our liabilities kind of flow and we don't have spikes and such like that. But I don't know, this whole anticipation makes me think, do we have more projects that we could push
Yeah.
a little earlier?
Yeah. But then you create first the excess that we can't do by federal law. And then it creates again, going to that smoothing, then it would increase the burden earlier in the process, right? We purposely identify the projects over a 4 or 5 year period, and we try to balance them into when they're needed, as well as kind of balancing the cost, the financial impact in the financial model also to try to keep it smooth. So there's a lot of adjustments going on during this
I'll
time.
leave it to the experts.
And a lot of this is about trying to maintain the secondary property tax rate so we don't see
Big spikes.
big spikes and valleys and inconsistencies.
Same
Okay,
thing
we
on the
want-
utilities, same thing on the
Same thing on the
utilities.
utility bonds, and I think you've mentioned that briefly, and you're going to get to that point. But we also retire bonds at the same time and manage this process to try to stay at a level rate so our taxpayers know what they can expect. Would that be accurate?
Vice Mayor, that's correct.
Okay. Please.
Okay, so the two main types of financings that we'll look at today are the general obligation or GO bonds and the utility system revenue obligations. The GO bonds are voter approved for a specific purpose and they are paid for by secondary property tax levy process. Utility obligations are a contractual obligation and they are paid for with the utility revenues. Okay, so next, this is the proposed new money financing for the general obligation bonds, and it includes funding for library, parks, public safety, and transportation. Target proceeds are $168 million, with 63% going towards public safety projects. There's multiple bond authorizations included in this issuance, as you can see. And then as with all these types of issuance, there are costs involved. Examples of costs are payments to the credit rating agencies, legal fees, there's some registration fees and some other miscellaneous fees as well. And then this is a tax exempt financing. So here are some project examples to be funded with the new general obligation bonds. There's a couple fire stations. There's the Gateway Library, which is funded through financing as well as cash. There is some funding going towards the IDEA Museum. And then, of course, the Northeast Public Safety Facility, the police headquarters renovations, and various street improvements.
Question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you go back to number 7?
Which slide? I'm sorry?
Slide 7. So the target proceeds, 168 million. So the second bullet point that you have other bond packages, so part of the issuance, it was authorized in those?
That's
Okay,
correct.
wow, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a couple comments about that, but I'll wait until you get to that point. Thank you.
Okay, so this chart includes all existing general obligation bond financing payments, existing and what's being proposed. And you can see the stable payments that I mentioned before, and where we're expecting the payments to be about $47 million for the next 7 years, and then it begins to decline after that.
This is everything.
All general obligation bonds.
Yes,
What
on
we
the
currently-
secondary property tax, the general obligation bonds. That's all that, that doesn't include the utilities, just the GO bonds.
And includes all historic issuances. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
oh,
not
yeah.
talking about,
This
yeah,
is- yeah.
just what we're proposed to
And the way we look at it is
issue in
looking
this.
forward, right? So we have an understanding of what the curve looks like in the future. So as the you can kind of see for the next, 5, 6 years, you can see kind of that leveling. Then as it slopes down, what that means is that's future capacity, right? Because the city will be back in 5 or 6 years and
Yeah,
looking
right.
at more opportunities, so.
So this is existing debt, and then the debt we're looking at on currently the 168.
Yeah, isn't it the yellow, which the,
Yellow's, no,
oh, no,
interest.
interest.
Yeah.
Do we have, no, we don't. So this is both existing debt and you've layered in the new obligation in this also?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I've seen that chart you're referring to, which is the one that shows existing debt paying off and how we're adding the new debt. And I didn't see that in this.
Yeah, well,
presentation.
overall, that's what this slope is. It's just, it's a
It's
combination of all
generally
that.
this, it looks like this. Mr. Adams?
Thanks. This is probably as good a time as any to ask this question. So I understand that on each of these bond issuances, the rates will vary depending on market, but do we have an average overall rate on all of our obligations, or can we, if you don't have it, I'd just be curious, what's the average or the mean or the median
Vice Mayor,
rate?
Councilmember Adams, I don't have that information. handy.
Provide
We
it
can
later.
get that for you.
Yeah, just curious. Thanks.
Is that chart that you and I were referring to online?
Oh, yes, I think, yes, that is.
Okay.
I've seen it before.
Vice Mayor, it's publicly available.
Okay, do we know generally where someone would go to get it if they wanted to see it?
It's on our website. I'm not sure where.
We'll get you the link.
Okay,
We'll get you
we'll
the
post a link, we'll post a link or something to that. That'd be
We can
fantastic.
do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Why does the principal amount go down at 25, 26?
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, that's a great question. So in this new issuance, we actually included some principal that's going to be paid in a couple months because we have some excess reserves that statutorily we're not able to keep through beyond this year.
So it's not that it goes down, it's that we're going up this
But
year.
so when we
and then it
apply
back-
the secondary property tax, right? So you have reserve, not going to use the word excess, but we've collected more than whatever payment. Is that what, you have a balance
That's
somehow.
correct.
So we're just adding more
And we
principal
can't,
this
we
year.
can't carry those reserves. We can't carry that excess. We have to apply it. We can't like build up some kind of huge reserve in the program. We
Okay.
have to be spending, and I can't remember what that time frame is, but so we're just applying what we've had maybe carried over from prior years, and we're going to go ahead and make those principal payments this year. Is that? I think
So
that's
if it showed 23, 24, the principal bar would be like lower then, is what I'm hearing? Or is that not the way to look at that?
Councilmember Spilsbury, I see what you're saying. Yes. So if you looked at this last year, perhaps, the principal would be slightly lower. I
Okay.
believe there's a few million, maybe 2 million that is getting lumped into this issuance for 24, 25.
Okay.
So what you're saying is we're not spending fast enough.
I would never say that.
Out of order?
Those are words that have never come out of my mouth.
I guess I'm.
I think it's not so much the spending issue. I think it's a reflection of the strength of our assessed values and the collections of assessed values, especially, I think, on the new construction side. I think we've seen in the last couple of years those values coming on. If there's a chart you'll see that'll show the values of the city going up, and we're limited on how much we can collect. And I think that's been pretty strong. And I think that just suggested we collected.
But we've lowered the levy in response to that.
Yeah,
right?
but what we're
try not
collecting is
to-
still, it's just, again, the dynamics of huge investments, and especially on the commercial side, has allowed us to do this. And this is not something that happens all the time. But it's just that anytime we have built up, try not to use the word excess, but dollars that are more than what we're paying, we can't hold on to that. We can't, Irma, help me out here. Irma, would you bail out the city law? We can't create a balance. Sometimes in the past, you would create these long reserves as kind of like you would do in your general fund, just in case, but we're not allowed to do that anymore. So go ahead, Irma.
Good morning, Vice Mayor Summers, council members. I don't think I'm on. Good morning.
That's
All
it.
right. Good morning, Vice Mayor Summers and council members. When we set our property tax levy, we include a 5% delinquency. We always collect better than that. And we're allowed to keep 10% reserve. And so when we set it, we already have a 15% cushion if we need it. When we set our property tax levy, we want to keep it level. So when we lowered it a couple years ago, we lowered it to an amount that we thought would be a good amount that would carry us for a few years without having to increase it. As our property values increased, that meant that we collected more than we anticipated. If we set it every year for the amount that we only need, we would see the property tax levy go down, then up, then down, then up. And so we try and keep it level. And because of that, we have collected more than we needed between the increase in the property values, also because of our 5% reserve for delinquency and our 10% reserve that we have, and therefore we will front load it, and that's why you see that $1 to $2 million increase in that year.
So it's not a lot, but it also goes to people are paying their taxes.
Yes, and it allows us to keep our levy
Smooth.
And just for clarity, the delinquency account is for?
Delinquency would be if someone doesn't pay their property taxes, they foreclose, or they just don't pay.
Yeah.
So we have like 99% something collection, and we assume we're going to collect 95%.
Okay.
And you'll see all that when we come back in June to present the property tax levy. And also, I will mention that that chart that you were referring to, Vice Mayor Summers, usually is part of the property tax levy, because we will show,
Oh, good.
we will show the bonds that are, the authorization that's outstanding and the plan to issuance and what that does to our property tax rates. So that would be coming later. It's usually not part of this presentation.
No, that's fine. It's a very useful chart. You could have even included it here because we've mentioned it before, but it's good to see how that levels off and we pay down debt, but we're maintaining a rate so to keep stability. Like you said, we don't want to have peaks and valleys in our rates. That's just bad policy. I guess help clarify something from this question. So we're using that, we'll call it excess, to pay down some of the principal, but why does the interest seem to be going up on this? So when you look at 25, 26, we're through 24, 25, all the way through really 29, 30, even beyond, we're level, but the yellow in this chart shows the interest. I would think if we were paying down principal, the interest would also.
But remember, this
down.
is just a 1 year little piece that we're adding. It's not if we were paying down.
Because it looks like
Tens
we're
of
paying
millions.
more interest.
Right, but again, this is just a one-time event. This is not really affecting the ongoing stream of payments significantly, because it's not.
That I understand.
It's not having a dramatic impact.
And Vice Mayor, this issuance being so late in the fiscal year, the interest amount accrued is very small. Does that make sense? Whereas next year, you're going to have a full year of interest on this new issuance. But since we're issuing this late in the fiscal year, the interest accrued on these new monies are very small.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Issuance.
Right. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's part of it.
I was missing that part. Thank you. Any other questions on this slide, or since we have Irma up here? Okay.
We could.
Slide 10.
Come back if needed.
Irma wants to run. I understand.
Okay, so this is the proposed new money financing for the utility obligations, and it includes funding for electric, gas, wastewater, and water. And as you can see, target proceeds are $307 million, with roughly 2/3 of that going towards water projects. And same as the general obligation bonds, they're standard, same costs of issuance, and this is also a tax exempt financing.
Very good.
Okay, so here are some utility project examples that'll be funded with the utility obligations. There are the three big projects that we are aware of: the AMI, the Advanced Metering Infrastructure, the Central Mesa Reuse Pipeline, and the Signal Butte Water Treatment Plant expansion. And of course, there's also some energy projects as well, so we put in a picture of some natural gas system improvements. Okay, and So this chart includes all existing utility financing payments similar to the GEO chart. So basically what we have outstanding plus what we are proposing. And you can see the stable payments kind of in effect, but not as flat as the general obligation chart, but still relatively flat beginning next year. And then the payments will decline further out on the right side of the chart.
And one of the challenges on the utility side is, I don't know how to say it technically, but the utility capital comes in big chunks, right? They're big projects, right? Big treatment plants. Whereas when we're doing GEO bonds, we kind of have a lot more pieces so that we can kind of spread out over a period of time. It's very difficult to do that when you're talking about a plant or a natural gas system. And so we have to figure out how to make that work, but at the same time deliver those capital projects that meet the current and future demand. So it creates a different kind of challenge because it comes in such bigger sets than what we see on the general fund side.
Councilmember Spilsbury?
So because this is sort of kind of up and down, I'm assuming, I mean, is there a way we could kind of get a general summary of what's causing it to go up or down, or like in 32 where there's a dip? We just don't get to see any information that this is based on.
So Vice Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury. So one thing that does incur frequently is that we'll do some refundings, and what that'll do is that'll remove a chunk of the principal, or we'll shift some of it around through like the refunding process. And when that occurs, it may cause a dip like this. But every year we work on kind of improving this to make it more stable when we do new issues.
So, I mean, for example, then in 32, you just know that's what you're going to do, and that's what's causing that dip right there?
That's what would
Or
have
that's
caused
projected?
that dip is the.
So you still have 5 to 6 years to look at opportunities to maybe shave off a little bit in those higher, the 30, 130, 132. There'll be, we want to believe that there's going to be a window between now and then to be able to shave some of that off and try to keep it level.
Okay.
But, again, the pressure on the utilities will continue to be large capital projects. So we're, and the biggest contributor or impact or whatever pressure within the utilities, when you go look at as far as the dynamics of the dollars, it's in this fund, right? It's not, when we're looking at rate pressures, it's from the capital investments that are required to keep up. And that's why you see some of the cities that have jumped ahead of us on that homeowner survey, is because they've deferred these kind of projects, right? And now they're having to do them in a very large scale, and it's having tremendous impacts on their rates. Obviously our rates continue to go up, but even at this level, we're still trying to keep it at 4 to 5% increases per year, as opposed to 95%, right? And so this is a very important chart for us as it translates to the conversation about utility rates in the future.
And I can assure you, by the time we get to fiscal year 33, this chart will not look like this, right? So.
Councilmember, go for it.
Are there any other distinctions between the GEO bonds and the utility obligations, revenue obligations, that we should know? I mean, I know the bonds are voter approved. Are there utility bonds that we do? Or
Yeah, no, we do.
Yeah.
We call them obligations, right? They're revenue obligations. They're contractual. So
Well,
council
I guess what I'm
approves
saying, are there any that you do have to that are voter approved
them.
for
We
the
have
utility side?
some in the past, but
Those are the
last-
ones that we've,
but more recently we've changed that, and so now it's the council makes those decisions because they're rate based. So we don't vote on the capital improvement program, the bonds within the obligations within the utility fund.
utilities.
Yeah.
That's sort of a switch in philosophy and.
Yeah,
that
we
we've
probably 4 or
adhered
5 years
to.
ago we made that decision. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And that's primarily the real distinction between those two is
Yeah, I mean, when
voter
we
approved
have
versus just
conversations, which will
contractually.
begin next week with our rating agencies, we have to present GEO bonds and have that conversation. And then we present utilities and that conversation. And the dynamics about how they're being paid off and what the reserves are viewed by them even, they're rated very differently. And we'll get a rating specifically for the utilities and a rating specifically for the geo bonds. So they think of them materially different too.
Are we unique in that we don't have voter-approved bonds for the utility side?
No, we're actually,
Okay.
we went to be more like everybody
Oh.
else. So I think I think Tempe may be the only one that I know that still votes on their utilities, but most of everybody else was not doing that.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Councilmember Adams?
Thanks. A quick question. So the general obligation bonds, voter approved, do you happen to know, say in the last 2 elections, by what margin did these pass? Approximate number?
More than 60%.
North of 60?
Councilmember Adams, I believe it's close to 70.
Close to 70.
It may have been
I'm
high
thinking for the last
60s.
couple of years, it's
Sure.
in excess of 60, so.
Okay. I thought it was in that range.
Overwhelming support.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm, so thank you.
Very good. Anything else on this slide, or?
So this is, lastly, this is a timeline for the financing. So on Monday, the council will consider authorization. And then on the week, on April 21st, the bonds and obligations would be sold. And then on May 15th is when we would be receiving those proceeds.
Very good. Questions on the timeline? Hearing none. Thank you so much for the presentation, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you. Oh, wait, never mind, you
I
can't
didn't
leave.
know he was done. So if we go to the slide, I think this is something the council has asked about, slide 15 before, and that's the legal capacity limit and what we're at, right, which is the 20%. I'm just curious how that has fluctuated over the years.
So Councilmember Goforth, so last time we presented the issuances in 2023, we were at almost 29% capacity. So it has dropped, obviously, quite a bit.
Due to the increase in value of our,
The legal
the
capacity.
net assessed value has increased. Would you say that's the primary reason?
And also, I will say that typically we include the information from the state because they put out an annual report. And as this slide explains, that annual report from 2024 is not yet available. And so we internally calculated it as a city with the help of our financial advisor. The positive of it is that we have more timely amounts here, right? Because we have the February abstract from the assessor. And then also we are including this proposal, our proposed issuances in the numerator of that calculation. Whereas if we had the state's amount, they wouldn't have that in the numerator.
I apologize, you do have more in the presentation. The City of Mesa logo in the middle, that little slide kind of threw me, so I thought we were.
Well, this is just backup.
This is just additional
Oh,
information.
these are extra, okay.
So Vice Mayor, you were correct. That was the end of the
That was the
presentation.
end, all right. It threw me a
So,
bit.
and then if you go to the next slide, this is something we have talked about a little bit as well. The remaining authorizations for some of these issuances or bonds that have been authorized but not issued. We've talked about that, kind of squeezing that timeline. I know the COVID years kind of threw a wrench into that a little bit, but, I just want us to continue to talk about, the timeline between the issuance and the completion of projects. And you can see here that I think transportation was the biggest one. Is that right, Chris? That had not finished a number of the bond projects.
I think that's maybe
it was
the case.
presented
Yeah,
at
some of these,
23%.
especially the 2018 projects,
Yeah.
the reason they didn't move forward is because the inflationary impacts. They would not have been able to move forward based on the amounts that were authorized in 2018. So it took until the last couple of years that we had, that's why Mark mentioned there's some projects that are being funded with both debt and cash, and many of those, like the Gateway Library, the PD headquarters, required us to wait until we had both, we had to make up the cash, I had to provide cash to make up the difference because the bonds weren't sufficient. So that was a significant part of the delay there. Public safety actually ends up being in two different bond authorizations because, again, the project costs continue to grow.
It looks like we're.
But otherwise, I think
checking them off here.
transportation is, yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
It is something we're aware of, but sometimes it's a matter of just what we put in the bonds doesn't become enough, and then we have to figure out how we're going to make up the difference. And a lot of times we've done it, we've been able in the last 5 years to accumulate some cash to close that difference.
So you would not say it has to do with, we just don't have the bandwidth sometimes to complete the projects, we just have so many
Well,
things like that?
that's always, could be a factor, right? But for these, in this case, especially those 2018 projects,
It was
funding. It was the inflationary pressures that put it outside of the amount that was set aside in the bonds. And so then we had to we had to both scale the projects down and find cash that we could contribute to make up the difference.
Councilmember Spilsbury?
Yeah, so when we see this chart and like only 25 million of the 78 for transportation from 2020, or, going down only 5 million of the 170 that we just passed, we're just not ready to do those projects yet. I mean, that's what this is saying?
Right, because a lot of those projects, I can't remember, I apologize, Councilmember Spilsbury, the list of projects, how many, if they're already under some kind of design, then that makes it, obviously helps us. But if we haven't even started design, then we've got to go through that phase. We'll bring back to council, when we get through the budget, we'll kind of bring back to you kind of a timing. Internally, we work on this all the time as far as the timing of projects and that have been already authorized and the ones that are currently authorized, and kind of show you the schedule and the timing of all those projects.
Okay, because, I know when we go through all the, projected projects that we're thinking of using the bonds for, obviously, they're not going to all be ready right now. But I know, like, for Idea Museum, for example, they're already pretty far
Yep.
along in that process. So 5 million doesn't seem like very much of the 2024 Parks and Culture. But do we just do this every year? So this is how much we foresee that we're going to be able to use this year?
It's identifying the projects. Some of the projects are underway, have been underway, and we're reimbursing those projects.
Okay.
And then it's also looking out to the coming year, and it's trying to identify, Mark works with the departments to identify what those needs will be to draw down. And so we want to make sure we have the funding to be able to
So
meet.
that could still happen too, though, like we would move forward on projects and then reimburse.
Yes,
going back.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's-
yes,
That's
yes.
one way to kind
Yeah.
of get ahead of some
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, one more question from me.
Absolutely.
I'm just looking at where you broke out the financing payments for the 2025 issuances in particular. I'm just curious on the GO bonds, where you go from essentially mostly interest in 26, 27, 28, 29, and then you jump up in 30? How, just practically speaking, what is that?
So Councilmember Goforth. So that is combined with what we have to get that existing, or the stable payments. Does
Okay.
that make sense? So when you look at it from what we're issuing, it may not be stable payments for this one particular year, but when combined with the other payments that we already have, it creates that stable payments, because from the taxpayer's perspective, they're paying their secondary property tax for all of our pooled general obligation bonds, if that makes sense.
So just curious, what's the benefit of breaking this out like this for us?
Just in case you asked.
Yeah. Councilmember Goforth.
We're just trying to, sometimes we put them in there
Yeah,
just in
true.
case.
Okay.
I think you caused the question.
Well, I know. Right, lessons learned.
Lessons learned.
No more backslides.
I appreciate it nonetheless, but
Councilmember Goforth,
something I'm missing.
I suspect the question came up before from prior councils, and so that's how it ended up in the back of this presentation.
So just as a maybe general question for my brain, what drives this more? The ability to be ready for projects, or the desire to keep it stable payments?
That's the balance, right? That's everything we work on. It's both scheduling
Yes, okay.
projects over a period of time, right? You have to do both, right? We try to be very careful. We want to make sure we deliver on projects in a timely manner as best we can. So we look at that schedule, right? We work on that schedule. Right now, every time we sit down with engineering saying, what's going to take to deliver these projects. Now, we know we can't do them all at once. We also know they're in different phases. Maybe they're early in design. Maybe they've already got design and they're ready for construction. All that's put into there. Then they have to go to Mark, and we have to sit down with Mark and say, okay, here's the demand, what it looks like in the future, now and into the future. Now help us to try to keep this smooth, and what does that look like? And so sometimes Mark may have to come back and say, hey, your capacity in this coming year only looks like this. Now, here's an interesting fact is we didn't issue last year, right?
That's correct.
Right, so because of just the demand and where we were. So all those have to take into consideration to get to this point, right? We have to know the demand, the capital financing that's needed going into the future, but we're also trying to be very careful to manage that because we can't have the big spikes.
Okay.
On the geo side, like I said, because we have smaller pieces to work with, it's much easier. On the utility side, you saw that because not everything, but a lot of things come in big sets, and that just takes a little more work on Mark's part.
I mean, because obviously we have 390 million that's left, estimated remaining authorization. So like we have the capacity for much more bond dollars to go out, to be issued, but.
Right, and since we just authorized, what did we just do?
260.
Yeah,
You
so
said 260.
260. So, yeah, we have prior years that are still coming. We have, but you're seeing more fire stations that are coming. You see, and this is just probably a partial. I don't remember all the pending project. We can bring you that list, right? So you can
Okay,
see what that
which you have in the
390 is.
past. I mean,
made of.
this is my 5th year, and I'm starting to get how complicated this is. So, I mean, it just is. But I guess when we go out to the public and we say, this is what we're going to do, and then 5 years later, we're still going to do it eventually, so I guess that's where I'm kind of trying to wrap my brain around of.
We would like to do it. I will tell you, so in the most recent past, it's been mostly because of construction inflation has made it, so the dollar amount that was
Just
in
wasn't
that part wasn't
sufficient.
sufficient. To be honest, looking forward now with the projects that have just been approved, what we're now having to consider is the operational impact to the budget in the future.
Okay.
So we have to understand, well, if we add another pool, if we add another whatever, what the impact on adding operational funds to support that. And so we're having to do a critical review right now as part of our budget process to say, do we have the capacity to add on new facilities and new operations? And so we're having to work through all those decisions too,
So
along with the other pressures that are already taking place on the
Okay.
general fund.
So, I mean, back to my very original question, which we all left because it's both, but the drive for this bond issuance is both then. It's what we have the capacity for and to make sure we don't have big spikes. We're trying to keep that pretty level.
Yep.
Okay.
I think that question is a great summary of the challenges that we have. It's only math, right? But it's the new math, so it's a little bit more complicated than folks think. A lot of the questions today, I think, in your presentation, thank you very much, summarizes what these are. The general obligation bonds approved, as Council Member Adams mentioned overwhelmingly, for quality of life and public safety. Those, we have to look at how much debt we want to issue at any one time. And that is complicated by things that Mr. Brady said, how much we can pay down, inflationary rates. We've seen a lot of challenges with the COVID shutdown, the decrease in the labor pool because there's such economic development throughout the state. So that has caused some labor shortages, and we will certainly be working on what the voters have approved, but keying in on making sure that the debt that we issue doesn't create unwanted spikes in our secondary rate, tax rate to pay it back, because we want to respect the taxpayer's wallet. The other piece to this, I would say, with utilities, is that this council moves very cautiously, but has been somewhat aggressive too, in making sure that we're going to have an adequate water supply, because without water, there's no city. So and all the utilities that go along with that. So this, it's a dance of mathematics to make sure that what we're doing doesn't unduly affect rates, that we try to keep those rates fair, and that increases are applied to make sure that we do have that water supply. And I think we do have one more comment from Councilmember.
All right. I think it's worth mentioning to the public because I don't think most residents know, but you touched on it very briefly, our overall principle and philosophy on taking on debt and how and why we say it's more of a fair way of paying for things.
Mark,
Can
you
you
said
just
at the
kind
beginning
of
the
reiterate that?
generational benefit.
Yeah, Councilmember Goforth. So it's the way I explained it before was that it is to a lot of people it's considered there's an aspect of fairness involved, right? Because with financing, the payments are being made and the residents are paying them through their utility costs while they're benefiting from those capital assets, right? Rather than saving up this, and putting the burden on the taxpayer now for projects that may not be done 10 years from now.
But can I challenge you a little bit to say that those future generations don't actually get the benefit of the vote, right? So they don't really, they don't get to decide. So either way, I think it's just a choice, right? Either way, a participant who's paying back didn't necessarily get to make the decision.
Right, but if you had
Whether it's
to
the front
only
or
make
back.
those decisions every couple of years, you would never be
Yeah.
able to build anything.
Well, and I would challenge you get to vote with your feet. So if
Yeah.
you don't like the taxes, that's all part of what you pay, then you don't buy the house and you go to, I don't know where you would go. That would be that much cheaper. There are fewer and fewer cities that are below us. And for costs, that's how that works. Any other comments,
Appreciate
questions?
that. Yeah.
Just a quick one.
Yes, sir.
Again, the new guy. I'm not trying to open a discussion about why we no longer allow the public to vote on utility rate issues or issues that affect utility rates. That was brought back to council, I think in 2017. I'm a big proponent of putting things in front of the voters. So I just throw that out there because I will be taking a look at that issue to better understand it. It would seem to me that if we are very competitive in our rates, then it would seem to me the voters wouldn't have a problem understanding that. And as they've approved our GO bonding at better than 70% margin, I'm not sure why we wouldn't trust them to make the same determination and decision with utility rate increases. So I just throw that out there. It was brought up a little earlier. There may be good reason for it, but it's something that's on my radar that I'll be taking a deeper dive into. Thank you.
Councilmember Duff?
I'll just comment a little bit on that. I see the utilities as a business, and in order for the business to function, there has to be certain investments made. And if the residents say, no, we don't want to make those investments, I don't know how you continue to function. That's just my thing about it. We have to deliver water. We have to deliver all these services. We have to get those. And we are open about how, we do vote as council, but it is a business versus, let's say, a project, whether it's a park or whatever like that. If the voters say no, okay, we don't have the park. It's fine. You can still turn on your tap every day. You can still have your trash picked up. You still can have these done. That's just my limited as a council member, and I'm sure we have the experts and give you a better explanation.
Jim, do you have anything to add, or we good? Okay. Seeing anything, so thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Again, it's great. Any other items to address on the council agenda for the 17th? I will just note a GEO bond-funded project for approval coming up, 4B, Fire Station 224, will be up for a vote, and that is in District 6. So at least I'm excited about that. Moving on. See, I told you we should have skipped item 1, but no. You want a 5-minute break? We will take a 5-minute break. 5-minute recess. Thank you. Before we continue, I want to apologize to Councilmember Heredia. I have ignored him unintentionally.
He could have interrupted you.
He could have. Councilmember Heredia, are you still on?
Yes, I'm on, and not the first time, Scott. So.
Yeah, no. It was Councilmember Heredia that said Mayor Freeman's nicer. Do you have any comments or questions on the items that we just reviewed?
No, thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
I appreciate your understanding and quick wit. All right, we are reconvened. Thank you, everyone, for making a 5-minute break, 5 minutes. So we will proceed to item 2A, which is where I wanted to start. Hear a presentation, discuss, provide direction on draft downtown Mesa micromobility and parking plan. Take it away.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, council members. Jeff McVeigh, Manager of Urban Transformation. And with me today is Jimmy Tracchio, a Downtown Transformation Project Manager, Anthony Rodriguez, our Downtown Transformation Specialist, and I'm pleased to introduce Ralph Deniscio with Stantec. He is our Senior Principal with their Urban Mobility Group. I'd also like to recognize in the audience the rest of the Stantec team, Jonathan Garrett and Aaron Cameron. I'm just going to note that Erin Cameron may be the only person in this room that can say that she has walked every street in downtown. Even I can't say that. I'm sure I've driven every street, but I've definitely not walked every street. We started back in summer of 2024 working on an urban mobility, our micromobility and parking study. And it's our pleasure today to be able to give you an overview of the plan and the recommendations and have a discussion and take council's direction. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Anthony to kick us off.
Let's see if that works. Cool. So I believe you all are fairly familiar with our work, but just a quick overview. We are the Office of Urban Transformation with Jimmy and I specifically focused on the downtown area. We are essentially functioning as a one-stop shop for everyone looking to do business in downtown Mesa, whether that is a small business coming into an existing space or a developer looking to put in new multifamily and retail, commercial, and so on. We just help simplify the development process by being a single point of contact. So with our work, we have been tasked with creating a micromobility and parking plan. Over the past 20 years, the city has invested time and resources into the downtown area to make it a more vibrant and active place. Along with that has come private development as well. And with the benefits of our success, we've had a growing population. We're at 3,200 residents, 20,000 daytime workers, and 2.5 million annual visitors on average. And because of all the people living here, visiting here, working here, we want to make sure that people are able to get around our downtown comfortably and easily. So we are creating a plan that focuses on making sure parking is available, multimodal transportation options, whether it be walking, bike, scooter, whatever the future is going to bring, are available as well. And then that people can find their way around downtown easily and comfortably. Now, just a quick overview of some of the active development we have going on downtown. From east to west, you see, mainly concentrated along Main Street, but also on the outskirts as well. We have a number of developments that are under construction currently or are in planning. What this doesn't show is the recent development that has come online over the past, we'll say 5 years. Over 1,500 units have come to downtown, which has been great for the population growth and businesses down here.
And just a little background on the project here. For our project goals, we set out for the foster the welcoming and vibrant environment for downtown. That is both to attract new people to downtown, whether they're residents, visitors, or businesses, but also to retain the people that are here and make sure that they are very invested in staying here. For integrating parking solutions, we want to maximize the use, availability, and the convenience of the parking that we have in downtown. For infrastructure improvements, we're looking at both short-term and long-term improvements that promote the multimodal downtown. Public safety is a big consideration we've taken in with the goals, especially for connections to adjacent neighborhoods to downtown, making sure people get across the arterial streets safely. Wayfinding we found is very, very important for our downtown. We want to make sure people are able to know where they're going in downtown. How do they get to the most convenient parking? How do they get to the businesses? And then also making sure that the pedestrian amenities and that pedestrian experience is the best thing possible for the people visiting downtown. Especially with the hot summers here, we want to make sure people have shade and comfort while they're getting around. And then finally, enhancing the cyclist light rail experience as well, having parking spaces for bikes, places where they can actually feel safe leaving their bikes and scooters and things like that. Next slide. A little bit of the timeline, as Jeff mentioned, we started in summer 2024. Since we kicked this off, we had a steering committee mostly made up of city departments as well as Downtown Mesa Association, which has helped steer the whole project down the road. We've also done a number of stakeholder interviews with neighborhood groups and other groups, people that are interested in downtown. And then we ended up having a public meeting in September 2024. And if you want to go to the next slide, Anthony. With this, the public meeting, we had Jeff Speck, who had done a walkability assessment of downtown while he was here for it, present his findings and his understanding of downtown and his recommendations. And then also, we gave the public a chance to talk about their experiences with downtown, tell us what they thought of the current conditions, and then what they would like to see for downtown as well. And with that, I will hand it over to Ralph.
Thank you all, and glad to be here this morning. Most of what you're going to see today was also presented last night at a public meeting where we did the presentation, we took some questions, and we had boards of materials around the room. Several of the council members were there. Thank you for coming. Now, at the end of the presentation, I'll give a little summary, I think, of what we heard yesterday. But to build off, and you can keep going, to build off the work that Jimmy and Anthony and Jeff were talking about, it's really about what makes downtown special and how can we reorient our streets and our parking in order to serve that. You look at the recent investment that you've made and it's working. New housing units, population growth, that number of visitors, the capital investments that are happening. There are new businesses that have opened here since I was here in September, and you can already see how much more lively parts of downtown Mesa are. And I think everything we're trying to do is really looking to build onto that. And in order to do that, you have to recognize that downtown is the place where a city, any city, should come together. It has those unique resources. It should be the epicenter of Mesa. It's the thing you all have in common, whoever you are, wherever you live in the city, whether you come here as a visitor, whether you have some business in any part of the city. We really want to make sure that everything we're doing is making downtown a draw and welcoming, and how can we orient our streets and our mobility system in order to serve that and keep going. And it starts from recognizing that place matters more than ever. It's not just the things you have, it's how you feel downtown. It's how the perception, the experience that you have. When we were here in September, we asked people, where else do people go? And they talked about Gilbert and Chandler. And we took a look at maybe what some of the things that they have compared to what you have in downtown Mesa. What you see on the screen here is an aerial shot of downtown Gilbert. You can go to the next slide. It's got some of the markers here where you've got large parking fields, you've got wide sidewalks, you have transit service, you have multi-use paths. But you can see it's actually, the density isn't even that great. But now you compare that to Mesa, where you have even more of some of those things. You still have large parking fields, you have the light rail, you have bus and shuttle service, you have wide sidewalks. But there are challenges, and they really felt on the ground. If you look actually closely in this picture, you can see Jeff Speck waiting for the light rail to pass on the right side there. And just a quick summary of our parking information. I'll get into a lot more detail about parking numbers as we move on in the presentation. But start to look at it on the next slide. at an individual street. And if you look at a street in Gilbert, and here we're showing McDonald and Mesa, you have to think about your perception as a pedestrian, as a bicyclist, as somebody looking to park, as maybe somebody who's just coming here occasionally or for the first time, and how the street feels. And that has everything to do with the width of the street, right? How wide is the asphalt? How many lanes there are? What does the parking look like? Do you feel protected as a pedestrian on the sidewalk? It has to do with the street walls, right? So what's happening at the back of the sidewalk, so you feel comfortable walking up or down the street, the amount of shade that there is. And you can see and feel like it looks just hotter on the right-hand side here in Mesa, maybe compared to that street in Gilbert. And that it's all of those things together that we're trying to attack as a part of this study. And again, building on all the things that make a downtown special, the things that are unique in a downtown, the things that are growing in terms of housing and schools, the concentration of public transportation, the retail that is really unique here and doesn't exist anywhere else. And how does that serve Mesa residents, the community services, this beautiful new city hall that you have, that's for everybody, the retail, the dining, the offices, the things that you do not have in other parts of the city. And then that translates directly to the growing residential population you have here. The services that you need for them, the more people you have, the more they're gonna need coffee shops and places to buy groceries and drugstores and all the other things that'll come with that residential life. We have to make sure we're building on all those. And of course, paying attention to our visitors who are coming here maybe just occasionally for the really unique attractions that you have in downtown Mesa. So a system has to work for all of those people together. And what are the challenges to that? The barriers, and this is what we heard in September, really about why people maybe don't come here as much as they do, or why they do and they do just this thing and they don't walk the 2 blocks away to the other things that are here in downtown Mesa. And a perception of a lack of parking. It's not a lack of parking. I'll talk in detail about that. But that feeling that I don't know where to park or how to use it. The roads themselves can feel difficult to navigate in anything but a car, and even sometimes in a car, just due to the speeds and the width of the road. And then the bottom list there is just some of the local challenges about just not being walk friendly. It's hot, it's not comfortable, I don't always know where to go. All of those things impact your willingness or ability to want to be downtown. And keep going. I'll dig into parking even a little bit more, but when we were here in September, what we did was a parking utilization study. So we had presented some parking inventory, which is we looked at where all the parking is, on street and off street, public and private, in downtown Mesa. You've got 12 or 13,000 parking spaces in downtown Mesa. When we were here in September, we walked the street at various times of the day to count how many cars were in those spaces. And what we found was that at no time was the parking more than 50% full. So of those 13,000 or so spaces, more than half of them were empty at any given time. So if one of the barriers is people feel like, I can't park in downtown Mesa, the raw numbers are showing that you can. It's just a question of where it is. It's a question of how it's regulated. It's a question of understanding how the system works. And if you look at the bar chart on the left-hand side here, even in the core area, which is just kind of the area between the Firsts and just up through the convention center, even in the core area, it's not more than 50% full. And each of those little colors or lines or polygons represent different parking fields. So the lines are an on-street parking space, the polygons are an off-street parking field, and then the colors represent how full they are at any given point in time. Here we're looking at 12 noon, which is the busiest time. And as you get to the green and orange, the green and the orange and the red colors, those spaces are more occupied. They're fuller. And you do see that there are places where you're seeing pockets of green and orange and red, and those are your most popular parking spaces in downtown. And often when we do parking studies, when people say, I can't park, that is what they're referring to. I tried to go to this place and this place was full, then I have to go somewhere else. And as soon as you do, that's a challenge, right? So that's part of what we're looking at here. I'll get into it a little bit more.
Councilmember Spilsbury has a question.
Yes,
You,
please.
you knew I was going to ask some parking questions. This just all kind of drives me crazy, so, as you know. I looked up September 19th, it's a Thursday.
Yes.
I specifically asked for you guys to look on a Friday or Saturday night. Do we not make plans around Friday and Saturday nights?
We did also do a Saturday utilization. I think the numbers were similar for September. We don't have them here in the presentation, but they'll be in all of our materials.
Because just from practical usage, I can't find parking on a Friday or Saturday night. If we come down to eat here, cannot find a parking spot. I know where all the parking places are. They're farther than we want to walk. If we do find something open, I think we need to look at what the reality is. Like, yeah, sure, it's walkable, but like, are people going to walk that far? And yeah, again, we'll just go drive somewhere else, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much I love the restaurant, how much I was so excited to eat there that night. If we can't find a parking spot that's in a reasonable walking distance, I'm not going to eat there. And so I go somewhere else. And so if I'm doing that, I'm assuming other people are doing that as well.
Well, Councilmember Spilsbury, I think that what you're touching on is exactly what we're trying to solve here, right? We're showing this as a starting point of data, right? This is what we observed at a particular point in time on a particular day. None of this means you don't have challenges that you need to overcome. I think our recommendations are using this as a starting point and trying to address all the things that you're suggesting. And many of them are things we're going to talk about in some detail, right? So where are the parking spaces? How are they regulated? Can I park there, right? Because some of these you can't park in, they're permit only, right? They're not always all accessible to every single person that comes in. Do you know where they are? You probably know better than most, but do you know where they are? Are there signs directing you to those places? And then, are they in a place that you're willing to walk from that has partially to do with the walking environment as well, right? All of those things are interrelated, and a truly successful, vibrant downtown has those things working in concert. So that's where we're trying to go. At any given day, at any given time, if we did this in March, it might look a little different. There might be different pockets. If we looked at a Friday night, we can certainly share the Saturday information. It might look a little different, but in my parking experience, if it was 60% full, that's still plenty of availability.
So just two other comments. A friend of mine took her very successful business out of downtown Mesa because of parking. That's a problem. And also, I cringe when we have an event at the Post because I know I'm probably going to have a hard time finding a parking spot. And so if I don't leave early enough and figure out, it's happened multiple times where I just can't find anywhere to park around the Post. So anyways, two other comments.
No, I completely understood. And again, and I've done parking studies around the country, I always want to think about it not just from the perspective of someone like you who comes here regularly, but that person who is only coming to an event, and that is their only experience in downtown Mesa. And when they're challenged, or if they got a ticket or they couldn't find a space or they got really frustrated, it's much more difficult to get them to come back. Right, so we need to set the whole environment to allow that to.
And I think there's also an expectation, I don't know why, but when people come to downtown Mesa, I think they should be able to park within feet of their destination. When I go to, and I don't do this very often, only when I'm compelled to, if I'm in downtown Gilbert, that parking is not necessarily really close. It's big, vast parkings, the surface parking or the parking garage. You're still hiking it for quite a while. So I think the proposal here too is recognize, maybe it's just making it more convenient and obvious, I think is what we're trying to achieve. It's not that the parking is there. I mean, if you're going to the Post, park at City Hall and walk 2 blocks, because that's about what you're going to walk in Gilbert.
You are assuming I'm on time, Chris.
No comment.
Or that I'm not wearing heels that day. Come on, when's the last time you wore heels and walked over there? No, I agree. That's why I said, I will admit I'm lazy. I will admit it. I like parking as close as I possibly can. But that's why I'm saying a reasonable parking distance.
I'm just saying I think that's what we're trying to do.
But I think the sign thing is a really important factor because we have some confusing parking signs
Yes, you do.
around. And I'm always like, am I allowed to park here? I don't know if I'm allowed to park here. I'm like, oh, wait, it says 5. Wait, what day is it? Like, I just think it's kind of confusing. You go into the parking garage at whatever parking garage and you're like, where am I allowed to park? Like, I can't ever figure out where I can park at Mesa Art Center or over here or over by the Mesa Chambers old office. Like, I'm always confused on parking and I am here all the time.
No, I 100% agree. That's one of the challenges that you're facing here in downtown Mesa. This graphic here is just looking at the public parking. So all the parking that's just publicly available on street and off street. So we stripped out, the parking at the bank or the church or any restaurant that has its own lot. And you're still less than 50% utilized at those peak periods. Again, maybe it's a little bit more spread out. Maybe you have to find it. But that's part of what we're hoping to address here.
If I may, real quickly. I find some of Mesa's downtown parking a little confusing, but I would go back to the reference to Gilbert. I don't find Gilbert any more convenient. In fact, frankly, I find downtown Gilbert, a little less convenient because you either have that parking facility, and the first time I used it, I had to figure out, do I have to pay to be in here, or is there reserved parking, or is it open after 6 o'clock? And then they have that big open parking field, or at least the last time I went down there,
Yes.
they do. You got to walk. The other comparison, if we're trying to make it with Gilbert, when I'm on my bicycle, I find downtown Gilbert more risky and challenging to navigate on a bicycle than I do downtown Mesa. And I'm in both places often year-round. So I don't see Gilbert as the standard baseline we should use for much. Just my personal opinion.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams.
I think Ralph has some solutions for our efficiency and the way we're using it. So if we kind of go through those, I think it'll put us in a better position for analysis and questions.
This 2 years ago, we approved trying to develop an app for parking that would identify live where the parking spots were. Whatever happened to that?
Vice Mayor, I believe Scott Kahn is here waiting just for that question to happen.
This is where the outside waiting room is really paying off. Hi, Scott. Good to see we have a Scott
Vice Mayor,
available.
Council, good morning. I've been waiting for this one. I was watching where this was going. We actually have a beta version of the smart parking app that we are currently testing. Prior to that being in beta, it was not accurate. So it would tell you something was there and it really wasn't. But we currently cover 3 garages and 1 street, and we're looking at adding more to that. And our plan was to work with Jeff and the Downtown Association, give them a chance to try this out, test it, and then open it up for council to do the same in the beta test, so you could give us feedback on what worked, what didn't for you. But it does have availability of open spots in these garages, and what's being shared with you statistically, we find to be very accurate. There are spaces. It's a matter of finding where they are. This app actually gives you a map. If you're a mile away and you're trying to find parking, it will use your smartphone technology and direct you to the closest garage with available space. And once you're there, it will tell you what other businesses happen to be near that garage that you might want to visit. Say you're going to the MAC for a show, you want to have dinner, it will actually tell you what's in the area. So it's rather sophisticated. It is 95% accurate today. We're shooting for 98. And we're trying to expand the reach so that it covers not just the garages, but the streets.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, we would prefer to include as much of the parking, available parking, public parking as possible. So I appreciate your update on that, because I know that was an interesting challenge to put this one together, and I'm very glad that it's working on it. Can we get it to Councilmember Spilsbury sooner rather than later?
Well, we definitely have all of you on the list.
It's rather slick, and if you wanted to see a demonstration of it, we could certainly arrange that.
Yeah, that would be excellent. Councilmember Duff.
Yeah, in the meantime, I don't know how it's done. I'm on Google Maps. I know if I'm going to downtown Phoenix or someplace like that, I usually plan ahead where the public parking is. Here, it's kind of hit and miss. Some of it's marked, some of it's not. I don't know if we can create some markers or how that's achieved, but a lot of parking isn't on the map.
So as we know, some of the garages during business hours during the week are reserved for the occupants of a building that might be next door or reserved for whatever reason during certain hours. We do not have this capability yet in the beta version, but we are attempting to figure out how best to determine what reserve spots would be open after what hours. And we probably would have to do that with tracking license plates going in and out of a garage. We know these license plates are assigned reserved spots. And when they leave, we now know that spot's open. We have not begun developing that yet. That would be kind of a phase 2 to this. Currently it's just really counting. If we know there are 100 spots in a garage and only 50 cars have gone in, we know there's 50 spots there. Okay, so that's kind of where we are in the development of the app at this point. But again, it's 95% accurate, and we've been very happy with it. And that's why we haven't rolled it out before, because it was sitting around 60% accurate. Worst thing in the world is you're told something's there, you go in and it's not.
Yeah, you don't want to release it prematurely. I'm just, again, happy that this is a great project, and I'm happy that you're continuing to work on it. Any other questions? Keep moving. Thank you.
All right. You'd mentioned Council Member Spilberry about some of the complications. We put this slide together, and I think this is exactly what you're talking about. Even within a short area around Main Street, basically just around the block, you've got 4 different time limits for how long you can park on the street. And that is exactly the kind of thing that ends up being confusing to somebody. When you pull up, oh, this is only 1 hour, this is 2 hour, wait, I need to go, I'm having lunch, I'm getting my hair done, I'm doing something else, I need to be here for 3 hours, I can't park in this space. So even though it's available, it's not available to you. And this is the kind of thing that frustrates folks. And when these sorts of parking and mobility studies allow you to take that step back and think about how you want your system to operate. And that's really what we're trying to do here. And this is exactly the sort of thing you're reacting to. And the second part is
real quick on that.
Yes, please.
It's also the I don't even know what the signs say, like green zone or red zone or this sticker or whatever, like that.
Permits.
Also, yeah, permitted parking gets confusing on when. Anyways, so besides the hour ones.
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, you may not have noticed it yet, but we have begun the process of standardizing the public parking signage so that you don't have a green sign here, an orange sign here. It's just going to be, did we go with blue? Blue parking? Yeah, we go. You're just going to have a blue, I couldn't remember if it was blue or green. We're going to have a blue parking sign so that all public parking lots are going to be signed with the same color to help address some of that confusion. So we have begun working on some of that wayfinding.
Okay, it's my turn, finally. Since we're all commenting, I'm just going to put this out there. So I'm just going to counter Councilmember Spilsbury for somebody who always has trouble a lot. I'm not going to.
Yeah,
You're looking at me like, what is she going to say? I'm the other side. I've never not found a parking spot. So we can't solve for just this, right? We have to figure out that middle, that sweet spot between how we feel and what does the data actually say, right? So I just want to remind people, we're not trying to get here because you have the complete opposite person too.
That's why
so
I said Friday and Saturday night is like the times I'm talking about. And maybe we don't plan for Friday and Saturday nights. I don't know. Maybe we don't care if we have people coming Friday and Saturday nights. Because I don't know that you're coming over here all the way from Los Angeles to come eat on a Friday or Saturday night.
Absolutely.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's when I have the most trouble. And when other people I talk to have problems.
I think there's a
We're gonna have
way.
the girls talk. I don't want to be left out on this. I do want to challenge the idea that we're designing a downtown, and that's an urban environment that we designed to be very dense, and the businesses depend on that density. It is not a suburban model, which is the other 139 square miles we have in Mesa, that you will have your parking right in front of the business, and that's the way it is. This is an environment that the businesses depend on people walking and enjoying usually multiple opportunities for entertainment and eating and shopping, events, whatever that is. So we want to use every square inch we can in that kind of activation. And in that kind of activation, we get sales tax revenue that generates that. And the last thing you want to do when you are walking around downtown, especially on a night, is have a big asphalt parking lot to make sure you have plenty of parking, because you will not walk past that block because it is dark. There's nothing to do there. It doesn't feel inviting. We have to keep it activated. So we want to use as much real estate as we can in a downtown environment to serve a purpose for the people. So what we try to do is centralize parking, and we have some ways in which Ralph is be showing us how we can add more parking spaces in our downtown without affecting the reserving parcels of land to be a parking lot. But we are adding parking in this suggestion, but we are also adding more mobility for people to walk, bike, strollers, handicap, whatever, for enjoying downtown and activating. A downtown is built for people to pass several businesses as they're walking, because that provides more enjoyment and exposure of the different amenities in the downtown. So usually the dollars spent are a little bit higher when you are walking by multiple options to spend your money. Oh, I didn't know that shop was there. Oh, let me go in there. And many of our people on Friday and Saturday nights, they are parking one place and they are hitting 2 or 3 breweries, and maybe they're going to go see a show, or maybe they'll go to the comedy club and they'll stop by another restaurant. They are going multiple places. And our weakness is we have these chunks that, because there's not the business there, that's another conversation. But parking lots, we need to have activated, interesting, safe, we're looking at alleys, things like that. Keep people engaged. Like, I just want to walk around downtown because it's interesting. It's fun. My friends and I can just enjoy multiple places. If we're thinking about, I go here and I want a parking space here, then I get in my car and drive over here and have a parking space here, it's not a people area. It's a car area. So when you build a place for people, people come. When you build a place for cars, cars come. We want to have people on the streets because economically we will prosper and build more density, more activity. So a long explanation of a downtown is an entirely different environment from suburban shopping malls or whatever. That's a completely different thing. And we have to put on like a different view of how we expect to navigate. If you're in downtown Phoenix, you don't expect to park in front of every place. You're just like, I park someplace, it's kind of central, and I will navigate. Eventually in the future, I hope to see that we have some autonomous shuttles that will navigate, so you don't always have to be in that walking idea, and there'll be some options. But we're trying to build that a really, really great downtown. And if we prioritize parking in front of every single business, we'll have to axe half of our businesses and have more parking lots.
I agree with that statement, and I know we have 26 more slides, so we want to get going. My only comment would be that we hear complaints about parking from the downtown businesses too.
Yeah.
So there's, whether that's a perception problem.
We hear
yeah.
complaints from them that their staff isn't parking outside of their door, And those spaces need to be reserved for customers.
So we need to look at the efficiency of the parking as well, which is tied to the app, which is tied to the presentation that we have right now, so.
Thank you.
Continue.
And I think you're making some excellent points, council member, and it's really about how all those things interrelate, right? It's not just the parking, but it's the walking environment. It's all the other ways that you're going to access downtown and get around in downtown, whoever you are, transit rider, a bicyclist, a pedestrian, a driver, a parker. And there are challenges to the walking environment in downtown Mesa. One of them is just the streets are extraordinarily wide, right? It is, you make a choice to cross the street because it is that wide, and it has to be enough stuff on the other side of the street to want to get to. You know, and also the blocks can be long. You know, some of the blocks are a 5-minute walk, and in the heat or for a lack of other purpose, that's a huge decision point as a pedestrian. So you want an environment where it's more comfortable and easy to make those connections. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So when we think about our approaches, right, so now we outlined the challenges, but the approaches to how you might address them here in downtown Mesa, it's reviewing and adjusting the parking regulations. It's right-sizing the streets for all users, right, to achieve that feel and increasing the multimodal options, and then all the sort of smaller ways that you can just make it easier and more comfortable to get around are all part of our kind of coordinated thinking here. And I'll just get right to them. Right-sizing the streets. We talked about Jeff Speck. He's a frequent partner of ours at Stantec. We work all over the country. You know, he is the international expert on walkable cities. He literally wrote the book. He, along with Aaron, walked every street in your downtown and gave a presentation in September about what it takes to make a place more walkable or for people to walk, and the factors that need to be there. You know, they're here on the board, but you know, a walk you need to feel safe. You have to have a reason to be there. It needs to be comfortable, and I think the point you were making, it has to be interesting, right? You want to walk past things that are like, ooh, what's down the street over there? I see that sign. I want to go check that out. The more all of those things are in place together, the more your downtown or your environment is going to be walkable. And there's many ways we can get at that. And we want to do that in a way that is absolutely preserving vehicle throughput. You know, downtown Mesa is still the place. That's how most people are accessing it. We want to make sure we're accommodating that, but doing it in a way that equivalizes all the other ways that people get around. And thinking about person throughput as the person, not just the car. And then we're able, as we look at this, to repurpose many of your streets to introduce a more significant, safe multimodal network for bikes, for scooters, for, you know, what are those things that were going around last night? The ghost tours? I mean, things like that. And who knows what else is coming here in downtown, right? As well as to create new parking spaces on several of your streets, not because the demand requires it, but because there's the opportunity to do it in some really key places. And I'll get into them specifically. When we talk about right-sizing your streets, in traffic parlance, a typical street of 2 lanes, one in each direction, can handle easily, like without congestion, without delay, 10,000 cars per day. In the interior of your downtown, none of those streets are close to 10,000 cars per day. You only need 2 lanes, and many of your streets are 4 or 5 or 6 travel lanes wide, right? So that encourages speeding. It encourages just the perception of the width of the street and how you feel as any other user on the street. So we're trying to think about this as we go through our specific recommendations. You can go to the next slide. And even the lane width, you know, that may vary on particular streets. You know, good urbanism would tell you that you can get down to 10-foot lanes. You actually have some 10-foot lanes already in your downtown. That may not be the appropriate answer everywhere, but I think where it makes some sense being open to having lanes that are narrower, because it just changes the feel, it changes the speed, it changes the comfort level for all involved if you do that. And then when we want to talk about increasing multimodal options, this map is talking about the level of traffic stress. It's a measure of how you would feel as a bicyclist given the condition of the street, how busy it is, how wide it is, how much traffic there is, how close you are to that traffic, if you're protected. And even on the interior streets, which are not that busy, most of them have a level of traffic stress of 3 or 4, which means you're only getting the highly confident bicycle riders on those streets. The more you bring that down to a level 2 or a level 1, you're starting to attract the more casual users, maybe you with your children, a family, younger folks, even folks who are older, folks who are new to bicycling. And you want to encourage that, especially as you're growing the residential population in downtown. And then even the area around downtown that's within kind of bicycle hailing distance, you want more people to be able to walk and bike to downtown. So this is, again, underlying all of our recommendations. If you're at the meeting last night, you saw we have a cross-section for every street in downtown where we've made a recommendation for it. I'm not going to show you them all today, but I will talk about West First Avenue, where you already have a bike facility. This is the existing layout of the street. Today, you have a protected bicycle lane on one side, parking, 2 travel lanes, a turn lane, bicycle lane in the other direction, and then another travel lane. The vehicle volumes, as I was just showing, don't warrant that number of vehicle travel lanes. Parking can be challenging on West First Avenue. It's one of the busier places. And even the bicycle facility, that width of an 8-foot facility with 5 feet of buffer is more than you really need to feel safe or accomplish, I think, what you're trying to accomplish. So what we're recommending here is a number of things. Putting a bicycle facility protected on both sides of the street, maintaining the 2 travel lanes, 1 in each direction, a really significant buffer that still changes how you feel and protects you as a bicyclist or as a pedestrian from the travel lanes, and then converting the parallel parking to angle parking, right? And that actually also helps you feel safer when you're getting in and out of your parked car, because you're not doing it right next to a travel lane, you're not doing it right next to the bicycle lane. And what you're able to do when you do this is you've accommodated all the users in a much more specific way. You've added parking, you've not impacted the kind of traffic flow on the street, and you've added parking spaces, right? So this is just a good example, and one example, I think, what you can do when you repurpose your streets and change the look and the feel and the character. And just think about this as one of those pedestrians, how much farther away you are now from where cars are moving. And that is a big part of how you feel safe when you're on a street. I compare this to maybe walking down University or Country Club, and how you feel if you're walking on the sidewalk on those streets compared to how this may be. All of this is related. You might find a space here, and then it's a much easier and more comfortable walk back to Main Street. And that's exactly, I think, what we're trying to accomplish. And again, we have recommendations for all of the streets in downtown. Don't ask me off the top of my head. I won't remember the details. Let's keep going. And when you look at this from a network perspective, here we're showing in blue places where you can add, either protected lanes for bikes or scooters, or a slower street that just is more comfortable and is achieving that lower level of traffic stress, even if that space is not protected. This is a really significant built-out network that you can accomplish in downtown Mesa, all while also, on the next slide, creating parking. In many places where we work, we're fighting the battle between those things. I want bike facilities, I want more parking, I want more of this. Here, you have ample opportunities to create all of those things in the same place by just redistributing your right-of-way to benefit all users and not kind of impacting that vehicle travel flow. So I think all told, when we do this, a final design would get more detailed, but you can add 200 to 300 parking spaces on street, which are often your most valuable spaces here in downtown Mesa. Let's keep going. Now let's get into the parking. You saw this slide already about the different regulations. And in a sort of ideal situation, we're using here an example in downtown Mesa, but your curbside parking, your on-street parking is often your most valuable. It's the place people want to be. It's as close to your front door as you can go. You want that to be accessible. You want that to be popular. You're regulating it for that purpose. And then for people who are staying a little bit longer, you're using that public off-street parking, which is often around the corner. It's got to be well signed. It's got to be well used. It's got to be easy. An app is even better, right? So you know that there's 200 spaces available in there. And then there's always that private off-street parking for a particular use, which is shown in red here. Let's keep going. What we're recommending here is in the core area between First Street and First Avenue, that you take all the parking, you eliminate the 30-minute, the 1 hour, the 2 hour, and everything should be either 3 or 4 hour time limit. So you're minimizing the folks who just park here all day, but you're making it so that if you do come, everything is the same, it's easy to use, it's easy to understand, it's long enough that you can do several things. You can go shopping and you can go have something to eat, right? You can maybe go see a show. You can sit here for a council hearing for 3 hours and you'll be fine, sorry.
You're underestimating at this point.
I mean, all of those things, it's just easier for you to find that and then open up some of those lots even that are permit only, and an app is a great way to do that, to understand that there is capacity, right? So that there's just more spaces that are available. And then outside that area, we don't see the need to have, specific timed regulations yet. As the area develops, as the area grows, as things get busier, you can expand kind of each of these areas. And this would work very well with the permit system I think we're talking about. And you're often doing this, people say you're trying to create turnover. You want people to leave. That's not what you're trying to create. You're trying to create availability. When I pull up, there's a space and I can park there, right? That's what you're trying to create. That's what that 85% is. In many places you do that by pricing. You don't have the demand, I think, to start implementing pricing for on-street parking. But as downtown grows, you may, and that's how you would continue to achieve over time, that same level of availability on the street. I promise I'm almost done. There's a series of complementary recommendations that go along with this. Ultimately, if you were to apply all these things, you've really got to, I like to use the term, love each and every one of the streets and be thoughtful about all the things you put out there. And there's some even bigger things you can do. Like along First Street and First Avenue, you've got traffic signals at almost every corner. We think many of those could be replaced with all-way stop signs, which means you won't have to wait for a red light, at each of those things, which will actually help traffic flow. It'll be safer because if you don't have 3-4 lanes approaching, but you just have one in each direction approaching, a stop sign is much more efficient. So this is something we think that you could certainly do here. Pick up drop-off spaces, for your Ubers, for your Waymos, directed. You can geocode them so that even the app knows it's only going to pick you up at these places. You can make them really nice. You can add benches and shade to those particular locations, as well as what you should do, around bus stops and really any other areas. We talked actually a lot last night about bike parking and scooter parking and the need for that in particular places. So you're not just attaching yourself to a lamppost or anything like that. And there are ways even with scooters to geo-fence where those things are and to maybe not even put them in dirt, but on nice little, nice little defined areas. You can keep going. And absolutely opportunities for shade wherever you can find it. A tree especially changes the microclimate along a street. So finding opportunities to plant the right kinds of trees that provide shade, I think are going to be critical of importance here. And then in terms of next steps, I think this, last night and today is our last sort of big chance for public feedback. Got a lot of good comment last night, also good comment today. I think from here, we take the recommendations, adapt them based on the comments we've received, and turn them into a final report that we can deliver to you guys, sometime in the next couple of months is really where we are. I think that's the last slide. It is. So thanks for bearing with the 60-slide presentation. We appreciate it.
Councilmember Spilsbury.
What were some of the comments from last night?
So I wrote them down. I think the feedback was generally positive from the meeting. I think there were some questions and concerns about the parking specifically. I think when we were able to walk through the whole presentation and show the interrelatedness of it, and I think people really liked the addition of parking on some of the streets. I think helped to make people understand that. I think a really good understanding of the interrelationship of all of these, right? And it's the same conversation we're having here. It's not just the parking, it's not just the street, it's not just the traffic, it's not just I need bike lanes, it's how all those things fit together in service of the kind of downtown that you're all trying to create. I think people really got that. The hard part of that means you can't just do one thing and you will solved everything, right? You've got to keep building all of those muscles together. A lot of detailed questions on things like the kinds of trees you would use, or sight lines at particular intersections, or even the design of certain streets, or should this lane be 11 or 12 or 10 feet wide, which is good. I think if you're having those kind of detailed discussions, that means, yes, we like this, help us figure out how to do it. I would say the sight lines especially, I think is something, as this process moves towards implementation, you want to pay attention to. You may want to, think about it as a pedestrian. If I'm starting to enter the crosswalk, where, what is the sight line to see where that travel lane is? And if it's now further away from you, you may have to do some things to protect that. It's the same for bicyclists or the interaction between bike lanes and cars. You want to make sure that the design is good, the sight lines are good, whether you paint the bike lanes green or you don't, or you put stanchions or you don't, are all detailed questions that I think you'll want to work through. And, I think also some questions on implementation.
Yeah, that was actually going to be, I did talk to you about some of my concerns with sightlines, and so I appreciate looking
You were
into
not the only one.
Okay. That was going to be my next question, was the implementation of this. So we have this plan and recommendations, but then how do we go about rolling it out and implementing and paying for it? And is there a prioritized list then of which streets to start with, or?
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, I believe Eric is still here. Good. I will invite Eric to come up and probably answer better than I'm going to. But over the course of the next 4 years, the Transportation Department has a pavement preservation plan that will essentially replace all the asphalt in downtown over the course of the next 4 years. There is an opportunity for us to add the incremental costs necessary to do the striping and whatever other infrastructure that would go over and above just the asphalt to be able to start implementing these recommendations. I don't believe we've gotten to the point of prioritizing street by street. We could definitely look at that as part of our final recommendations. But I think that is really, we're at a very opportune moment actually with the plans transportation has for our asphalt in downtown.
Okay. And then I was going to talk about trees, but I'll leave it at that. I'm not an arborist, I'm just married to one, so I have questions about that, but I'll talk to you later about that.
Councilmember Duff?
One of my frustrations on the parking issues in downtown is we have a lot of permit spaces that are all different colors, and we talked about that. But how to be more efficient in them, especially, there's parking open, but it has this permit sign. And even after hours, in the small print, is available. How do we manage? I hate the idea of someone has a dedicated space that they paid for, but they're only here a couple of days a week, and that space stays empty. There's some efficiency. I have ideas about that, but the reserved parking and where they are, I don't think they should be in front of a business. That means they are a business owner, and that should be a customer spot, and maybe they should be pushed a little further away from their door to ensure their customers have that available. Can you talk a little bit about some suggestions on that?
Councilmember Duff, yeah, I can talk a little bit about it. There's some nuances to the permit program here. I think the biggest piece, and first of all, I think you're right on, right? You want to make sure that the spaces are available. It's just good parking policy to say that the most convenient of the spaces are available for customers, right? That's, in most plans, that's what you're trying to accomplish. From a permit perspective, there are some lots or garages that are primarily for permit holders only. I think we're recommending that we open those up more to the general public. So, if you look at the maps that we showed of the utilization, you might have one of those permit lots that's 60, 70% full, but that doesn't mean that anybody else can park in that remaining 30 spaces. Opening them up, managing them, whether it's through an app or through just, ongoing practice, or taking some spaces in there and making them available to the public because they're open all the time, and signing and regulating them that way, often can go a long way towards doing that. There are groups in downtown that you're trying to protect the access for with the permits. They're paying for that privilege. So I think there's some things that you want to make sure that you're preserving, and often the permit systems are about some level of certainty, whereas I'm paying to know that I'm going to be able to get a space in this facility. That may not mean I need to get space 23 in this facility, but at that, I come here every day, I'm paying for the privilege. I think we're trying to manage that within the overall system, and it may mean that there's a little bit of moving around and opening up and sort of working towards those efficiencies.
What are your ideas on having more universal reserved spaces, so they're not allocated to one person or one business, but we have an allocation of X, and those are floating, and maybe be in a garage, maybe not be against the businesses, of course. We push back a little bit, but to know there's those reserve spots, but they are, as long as you have a permit, you can park in a reserved spot wherever that is in downtown, wherever these allocations are, be more efficient, so we're not holding a space. Some kind of efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it generally. It's often more efficient to do that, right? So that that we've issued 100 permits and there's 100 spaces in this facility that are reserved for permit holders, but they're not, and you can oversell them. You can let other folks use them because on any given day, 100 people won't be there, as different from reserving, I get space 6 and you get space 12 and it is mine forever and ever and ever. You do gain efficiencies from doing that. You also gain efficiencies from sort of minimizing the variety of permits that exist.
Sorry to interrupt one moment, but City Clerk, note that Councilmember Heredia had to leave the meeting, so we're down to 5 members. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Duff, if I may add on to that, we talked about this a little bit last night at the public meeting. I just want to make clear that within public parking, that meaning publicly available parking lots and non-street parking, there's case law all the way up to the Supreme Court, happened in the 1970s, that does not allow us to dedicate an exclusive right to a parking space to a private entity. Meaning that all of our parking license, whether it's a permit or not, is a non-exclusive right. Meaning that when you pull into, say, the Pepper Garage, you have a permit that allows you to park within certain field of parking, but not a specific space. And what Ralph was mentioning, and I think where you're going, is that Pepper Garage is a great example. I don't know how many color permits we have in there, 5, 6?
Something along those lines.
And I think where you're getting to is that maybe Pepper Garage should just be one permit type. And then you get what you get when you get there. And it will improve availability because we will have a better sense of the overall use of the garage versus individual colored permits.
I agree. The different colors, I think, is confusion. And usually in those colors, you look at them, they're rarely even at the 85%, rarely at the 50%. I see, I'm not a purple tag, I'm a red tag, so I got to park here. And there's just unused spaces all the time.
Councilmember?
Thank you. I agree, or not I agree, but I want to tack on what Julie asked, implementation. So this is all great. So how are we going to implement and in what priority going forward? So I'm sure there's, obviously there's some funding issues, there's timing with transportation and things like that, but I would assume and I would hope that within the final report, those things are taken into account and here's how we're going to move forward with these recommendations and what we're going to recommend to council, and assuming we, agree with the direction, this is how it's going to work and this is how it's going to go over the next several years, right? I mean, that's not all going to get done in a short period of time. I imagine there's maybe several cycles of. So anyway, that's my comment. I would like to see the action plan, the implementation plan.
Eric, are all of these streets up for repavement over the next 3 or 4 years or whatever the time frame was? Because that makes sense that we would do it at the same time, so we're not causing too many problems.
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury. So we've as a transportation department over the last year, we've been putting together a plan to do a mill and overlay for the entire mile downtown between University and Broadway and between Country Club and Mesa Drive. I think what may change is discussion about the priority. I think we are looking at doing quadrants of the downtown each year, but we're happy to have those discussions. We tried, I think one of our staff members got a little excited and was like, we can pave the whole downtown in 1 year. And we're like, the disruption that would cause, we need to spread out the pain a little bit longer to be able to do it, but it's our commitment that we'll be there over the next 4 years, starting next fiscal year.
And so how many of these streets or recommendations are really just a repavement with different lines versus like restructuring or reconfiguring the street?
Councilmember Spilsbury, the recommendations we're making are, for the most part, curb to curb, right? So within the cartway, we call that, so it's within the street. Many of them you can handle with just a restriping, the opportunity to mill and resurface, so you're scratching up all the asphalt and then repaving and then putting new striping down on fresh asphalt or concrete or whatever is, that's a much greater opportunity. I think some of the recommendations that are being made for more trees and things like that can typically happen in the landscaped area that already exists on the street. I don't know that I could speak to what's needed to plant more trees from a design perspective.
Okay, I mean, I know like from last year, looking at potential bond projects with Center Street, right? Like there was like a whole overhaul we were gonna do to Center. Like, could this kind of stuff fix some of those issues, or is there more?
That's a separate project that we'll be bringing back to council.
Well, that's my question then. So that would not be, I mean, they had recommendations for Center. So what I'm asking is, are previous conversations about Center Street specifically different than what their recommendations to redo Center?
Eric, you're going to have to
So,
help with that.
Councilmember Spilsbury, that's a great question. And I think in our report that we had last year that we did, we had two different options. And one was essentially a restriping option and not changing curbs. It's a little different than the layout that's been proposed with this. And I think we can discuss the merits of that and come up with a solution. The project, and when we started talking about moving curb lines, that was the second option to create, let's say, a better streetscape, a more better use of our right-of-way for wider sidewalks, for more landscaping. But it is definitely more intensive.
Yeah, more.
There's moving curbs, there's possibility of moving utilities to be able to do all of that. So
Okay,
that's
so that was like much more extensive than just what they're suggesting.
Yes.
Okay, so we just would need to talk about that when we come to it.
Yes.
Okay, because, yeah, I love maybe like some continuity through all of this, right? So you kind of know what to expect. That, I think that is what your point is, like when there's continuity, you know what to expect when you turn a corner or get to a street of where you can ride or drive or whatever. So I guess I would want to make sure whatever we decide to do with Center, there's still some of that continuity that would go along with that project.
Thank you all for your presentation. I mean, this was both a parking and microtransit. We heard a lot of parking, which tells you how important that is. I look forward in future to talk a little bit more about the microtransit side, because I think there are other areas of our community that could benefit from that. But once again, thank you so much. Do you have anything else?
I just wanted to comment on the design that they're recommending here, that it can be achieved when we re-asphalt, but there's no capital improvement, is painting and adding. I mean, if you want to, it wouldn't require bond stuff. It's whether we did a delineator or a curb for the cars to go. These are just minor things. I correct me if I'm wrong, but it's no capital improvements. It's just changing paint lines when we repave, for the most part. Of course, trees and whatever enhancements we can discuss and how that's going to be achieved. It's been a goal to increase trees here since I began. We finally did get some trees, but It's not a capital improvement project.
Right, I guess between like new signage or the paint, the whatever, like there's gonna be money, there's gonna be cost involved that's not maybe necessarily a bond project, but do we have money for it, I guess, or is there gonna need to be money approved for that?
Well, ultimately, council approves it every year. We use
Right.
the budget, so.
I guess what I'm saying, looking
But
at-
what Eric refers to, and Eric's speaking to you, the advantage he has is he has the dedicated sales tax for transportation. So typically, a lot of these projects, the asphalt overlays and improvements in streets are funded from that fund. So that will allow some flexibility to move forward. Now, it's in the context of our pavement management program for the entire city, right? It's the capacity, funding may be there with the capacity to push through those projects. But it sounds to me what Eric's already telling us, that's already in their program over the next 3 to 4 years. And I think what we'll present to council is, as we work with the consultant, the kind of prioritization of those projects through the downtown area as they've been scheduled for some type of overlay or a micro, what we were talking about, which? Overlay, mill and overlay. So we'll present that, but it sounds like it's already in their schedule and we'll give you the specifics.
Because if you were gonna repaint it, you would just repaint it differently.
Yeah,
the
but,
same.
right, but yes. But knowing that
Essentially.
you're gonna come back and do a mill and overlay, it probably wouldn't be wise to spend a lot of time doing that and getting people,
Right.
adjusted to that.
So what about the signage, as far as changing signage, or is that already something that we have money that we're
Yeah, again,
using
that
for
comes out of that
that
same fund, the
same thing?
transportation fund, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if signs for parking garages are the same, okay.
Vice Mayor, council members, while the mill and overlay is part of transportation's sales tax revenues, there are recommendations here. Eric wants me to make sure that we are clear. The removal of street traffic signals at certain intersections, that's a little bit more capital intensive. That would be a capital project.
And it's an engineering concern because to do that, you'd have to redo a lot.
We're gonna have to go below grade.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
So where are we here? I guess I'm a little confused as far as, is transportation's overlay going to be driving the project, or are we going to now maybe do it in concert with, here's the recommendations as far as changing some of the streetscape and parking, bike lanes, and so that may change transportation's calendar as far as...
Well, I think it just changes maybe the sequencing of it. I don't
Right.
know that it changes it, moves it, accelerates it up.
But as you said, instead of doing these segments
Right,
or whatever,
right,
you may do an entire,
But that's where they
3
need to work
blocks.
together on that, yeah.
Right?
So Vice Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, we'll invite Eric back up. We have ensured, we touched on it, but we had an internal staff advisory committee that was helping to guide this process. Eric was a key member of that. It is our intent going forward that our recommendations and our implementation plan are done in concert with and in coordination with transportation, so that what council considers to be highest priorities coming out of the micromobility plan, it aligns with our projects moving forward with pavement preservation.
Okay.
So I think just to add to that, we were waiting for this meeting to receive direction, and now we'll start to hopefully coordinate that effort about, well, what are we gonna repave in 25, 26? And how do we make that work with what the priorities are?
Okay.
I will add, though, I think that there is going to be a balancing of what is the highest priority as it relates to micromobility and what is the highest priority as it relates to pavement preservation. If you've been driving downtown, there's a couple streets where the asphalt is in really rough shape. And we should probably look at that, the condition of the asphalt, as one of the elements that plays into our prioritization.
Okay, so the direction, I just want to make sure, the direction you've heard today is we like the report, please move forward in working with transportation on implementing some of these recommendations as far as when you do the work. Okay, that's great.
Well, it's just to provide feedback. There is no direction on this, right, Jim?
Well, we need that. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah,
the direction here, yes. That is a consideration why we're here, because
Right.
like the councilor is suggesting, we now need to move towards an implementation plan. So we don't jump ahead of that until we have a conversation with the full council. What I'm hearing is, it sounds like everybody's comfortable with the recommendations. Now, as being suggested, we'll start working on the implementation plan, what that looks like.
I just wanted to tag on just one more thing, is that I appreciate being more multimodal, because the people who live in downtown and surrounding neighborhoods have a lot of frustration right now of wanting to walk or bike, but it's not safe. They have all kinds of concerns, their accesses are blocked, everything. I think in having this more accessible within and outside of downtown, we're gonna see a lot less cars, going from, I live in the neighborhood over there, I'm gonna take my car here because it's uncomfortable, unsafe. I can't take my kids on, to walk or bike over here. It is very uncomfortable and unsafe in a lot of part of our downtown, and with the building community here, just from apartments further to the east and coming downtown, they've been asking, I'm new to downtown, how do I get from here to there on my bike? Or how would you suggest I walk in? Because I went by there and there was, it was not a good experience. There's a lot of frustration within the people that are here that it's difficult for us to move around without a car. So I think if we make it safer, more interesting, more comfortable, that we will have at least the cars that are here within this area are going to stay at home.
Sorry, one more. So as far as the wayfinding goes, that isn't already in the streets budget, right? Is what you kind of talked about. So where is that? Because we also said that's an important part of this, right? That they exist, right? The spots exist, but we don't know where they are. And we've actually been saying that for quite some time up here at the council. So when does that get added to this plan?
Vice Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, you'll notice if you look around today, we have begun that process already. So the standardization of the parking signs, that has already started to be implemented. So we heard you loud and clear, and we started working on that. I believe signs have actually been installed in many places. So we're continuing. It's going to take a little while because we've got quite a few signs to replace. There is that's the direct wayfinding. That's when you get to the parking lot and seeing the sign. I think there's a broader conversation we have to have about, on the edges of downtown, helping to drive people and direct people towards those parking fields.
When is that conversation going to happen?
That conversation will need to be part of this implementation plan.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Any other feedback? Hearing none, run.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Brady, I understand that this long meeting has challenged Channel 11's video data storage capacity. So in recognizing that, item 2B or not 2B, that is the question.
I think we will reschedule that for another time.
We'll reschedule that.
Thanks, Jeff, for hanging out with us. The other Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there any objections to deferring 2B? Seeing none, item 3A is to acknowledge receipts and minutes of various boards and committees. That would be the Economic Development Advisory Board meeting held on February 4th, 2025. I have a motion from Councilmember Duff, a second from Councilmember Goforth. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Item number 4, current events, summary of meetings attended. Anybody want to mention something now, or do you want to hit that on Monday?
We're still at National League of Cities.
Yeah,
We were all in National League of Cities in Washington, D.C., and served a variety of committees and talking about federal policy. And we don't want to go through all our committees, but it's an interesting time for sure to be in Washington. And we met with all our legislators.
Fantastic. And I think if anyone wants to touch on something on Monday, we should have a little bit more time before the council meeting. Item number 5, scheduling of meetings. Mr. Brady.
As you mentioned, Vice Mayor, we'll see you on Monday for our council meeting as well as the following Thursday. Thank you.
All right. Other than that, I would remind everybody to wear green. It's St. Patrick's Day that day. And I will take a moment of personal privilege to say happy birthday to Mayor Freeman. Today is his birthday. My wife baked some goods and he was not here to consume them, so that's his fault. With that, item 6, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Or second, whatever you need.
Councilmember Duff made the motion, Councilmember Adams the second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned.